2014 FIDE World Cup. And that means that today, in the second classical games, we shall see whether there will be a result and two players will qualify to the finals, or tomorrow will be yet another tie-break day for the players and for us. Evgeny, what do you think?
It could be both, Anna. In fact, I don't expect two results today. Let's be fair. After first draw, you tend to try to be very solid, and then I do suspect at least one of today's games will be like all fair, square, and finish in a draw. But yeah, we might have two tie breaks, and I still have a hope that maybe we will have a result today. So
I
let's
also
see.
have hopes, but I would predict the same as you, that it's likely that the players will take a solid approach. Yesterday, what we saw interestingly is that Black was doing very well in both games.
Right, so today, if the trend continues, it will be Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Dingley Ren who will be doing great with Black, right? So, to remind you, the second game played with colors reversed, of course. It's Yu Yang-Yi with white against Dingley Ren, and Teimur Rajabov with white against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Teimur, by the way, his last classical game he won was against Jeffrey Xiong in the Grunfeld defense, let's not forget. So that's the opening I expect today. Well, depends on knight to f3.
One knight f3. This could still transpose to, of course, many of the main lines, but it also may be an indication of a more solid setup by Rajabov.
Yeah, right. There was nothing wrong in going for some sort of a Grunfeld. Well, knight f3, knight f6, c4, c5. So that will be a symmetrical English, and then it depends on like move 3, move 4. Of Teimur Rajabov. And over here in the game between Yu Yang-Yi and Dingley Ren, I'm put to shame with my predictions, because I thought it will be e4, e5, and a battle in the Ruy Lopez or possibly in the Jacopiano. But Yu Yang-Yi went for d4.
And c4.
Yeah, d4, knight f6, c4. Ding is not at the board, so I believe he just played his move 1 and had to leave, perhaps. Whenever he returns, he'll play e6, and then either the Nimzo or d5, the Queen's Gambits, this kind of stuff. Well, it could be the Catalan, perhaps.
Yeah, and while we are pondering upon the opening in that game, there are quick moves played between Teimur Rajabov and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Let's just catch up with their current position.
Yeah, well, if we can have, the board, the analysis board on the screen.
Or switch to their camera in the meantime.
Yeah, we do have the analysis bit, because that's a curious line, even though it looks pretty harmless. This knight c3, d5, c takes, knight takes, that's what we've seen in already few games there. And then the move e2, e3, it has some history to it. So it was played, it was played a lot of times, and similarly a very harmless variation. So White's idea, in fact, is to go d4 and to switch to some positions with isolated pawns. So like if Black would play something along the lines of e6, d4, c takes, e takes, and this position you can have from various openings as well. So say
the Caro-Kann, the Alapin of the Sicilian, so many lines.
A lot of things, yeah. But Black says, I'm playing the Grunfeld, so I'll take your knight on c3, and let's see what you take back with. And very often it would be b takes, g6, d4, and Grunfeld-ish positions. But that was Teimur Rajabov against Peter Svidler in last series of Grand Prix, so not this year's, but the year before, who has taken with the pawn, and then the game went queen d1, king d1, and this seemingly harmless endgame was eventually won by Teimur Rajabov. Later on, the same year, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave plays with Black against Magnus Carlsen. Same position. Magnus goes for an endgame, and while Magnus had chances, the game was eventually won by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So that means that both players have experience in the end memories with this position.
And it also means for us spectators that just because the queens are off of the board, it's not going to be a boring game. As Evgeny mentioned, White and Black can both aim to play for a win here.
The thing is, the queens could have been traded, but Maxime pretty quickly plays queen c7.
All right, he didn't go for queen d1.
He doesn't want to swap the queens, which as far as I know, was considered to be a sort of a concession from black. So in a principled way, you do take on d1 and you know how to make a draw in this endgame. Some people do know. Well, after queen c7, white goes e4, and the problem with kind of natural response e5 is this weakness of the d5 square. So white would be immediately very comfortable there, putting his light square bishop to c4. And, well, essentially the difference between the setups, so that white does have a potential outpost on d5 because both black pawns move to e5 and c5, while white's pawn on c3 does a very good job of stopping black from getting his knight to d4, for instance. So that'd be a bit annoying for blacks. Therefore, black goes e6, bishop d3, bishop e7. But then, white has the potential option of seizing this space with e4, e5. In the right moment, I suspect something like, well, you probably play castle short first, but queen e2 as well is an idea. And say after queen e2, castles e5. This might develop in a very dangerous attack on the king side for white. And I've intentionally didn't castle short for white starting with queen e2. I suspect castle short for black is not the most precise move, because after e5 you might as well go h4, support knight's jump to g5 and save on castle short. Maybe you'll go king f1, maybe you'll castle long. So this promises us in fact a very interesting game. Unlike that was my guess that it'd be a test in the Grunfeld, that it's something that we've discussed here. It might appear, would he gone for the Grunfeld Rajabov, or rather allow Maxim to play the Grunfeld? It could have been like that. Seemingly very sharp line for the outsider, but both players would know what they're doing. It would be, simplifications and a draw around move 30. Not now. So that does look interesting.
It does, and I also feel like this is once again a smart choice of opening by Rajabov, who did a similar thing against Jeffrey Xiong. In that game, he did test the Grunfeld, but with a sideline. Today, he doesn't go for the Grunfeld, but he did choose something that's interesting to play, and where he can put pressure on Maxim. And I think that's a good indication that he's not here to make a draw and just place everything on the rapid games, especially against someone who is actually maybe even stronger, if I can say that. The world number 6 may be even stronger at shorter time control. He's really good at rapid and blitz, obviously. Yeah,
absolutely. And I believe Rajabov said it after the game with Jeffrey Xiong in the interview, that the position, at some point, it was just much better for him. And then, if you remember, he played a strange-looking move, queen d2, and they've repeated the position a couple of times. So once again, I'm referring to the game of Rajabov against Jeffrey Xiong. And later on, Rajabov said, I felt like I'm no longer better, but the position is interesting, and if I have to play for a win, why not now? Why should I drag it to rapid and blitz? In a way, he's brave.
Yeah, so and that's very nice for us as well, that today seems to be a promising game and not a quick draw.
So queen e2 is played, Maxim is thinking, and in the other game, it's well, I want to say far less entertaining. It's the same Nimzo with queen c2, same Nimzo queen c2 line that Yu Yangyi was playing against Vityugov in a couple of games, right? It was in a classical game, and then one of the rapids, I believe. Right? So that's the position for a time being between Yu Yangyi and Ding Liren. It does look familiar indeed. And there, I believe Ding Liren should be well aware of White's possible tries. And well, the problem with this line for black, it's very solid, but it barely gives you any chance to play for a win. As long as white doesn't do crazy stuff and just develops the pieces. And
black usually doesn't have much trouble equalizing, but it's also difficult to get more than that, as Evgeny said. So this could be more of a solid approach by the two Chinese players, while the other game is heating up from what we can see in the opening. At least it's a very interesting position with imbalance in the structure and different exciting plans in this middle game.
Yeah, right. So here it's similarly only moved 9, so you could try to say, well, it can be this, it can be that, but the structure is such, so unless black accepts playing e6, e5 with a loss of a tempo and getting this somewhat inferior position because of a light square weaknesses, then more or less the structure is defined in fact, because white's continuation will be e4, e5 as soon as he feels like that's what you want to do, you know, grab the space with e5, even if say black does not cooperate, doesn't go for castle short immediately, still e5 is pretty much legit move. And then castle short seems to be a dangerous business, but you can try to play b6, bishop b7, castle long, in which case, once again, it's a very, very entertaining game. Bishop to d7 played by Maxime. I don't quite understand the subtle idea behind this move. Unless he's planning, well, it does make sense though. He perhaps wants to put the bishop on c6 and then the knight on d7. Say, in this case, e5, bishop goes to c6, and then knight to d7, and he kind of applies additional pressure on e5, because bishop f3 at some point will be an idea. All right, so bishop d7 played. Let's see, Rajabov castles short pretty quickly.
Was going to be my question to you, whether you think he will wait with castle kingside, but it's not so easy to find a waiting move because the c1 bishop doesn't really have a good square where you can develop it.
You mean for white? Yeah,
yeah, white. Just to wait whether black will castle kingside.
Yeah, so I'd say bishop d7 was clever in this case, because yeah if you castle immediately, he might end up doing so, castling kingside for black, but then at least white knows where the main target, where the black king is, so he can act accordingly. And in this case, I would actually consider going e5, as I said, h4, and maybe playing bishop f4 or g5 and castling queenside. But after bishop d7, as you've pointed out, it's perhaps two alternatives for white. To try to play e5 nevertheless, even though black didn't castle, or to castle short himself. Because if you try to do something else, those would be artificial moves, right? Like bishop e3, but then if later you're to play e5, then bishop on e3 is kind of on the way. Yeah, it's a bit... So well, in such structures, interestingly enough, bishop's place is on c1, because it works on this diagonal, the diagonal you want it to work on. And the only problem with having the bishop on c1 is that the rook is on a1, not being able to take part in the game. So every now and again, white would play, say, develop the bishop, put the rook on d1, and then return the bishop back. That absolutely normal scenario for this. But yet again, in those positions where you don't really know which move, or rather, you have a few moves, I believe it's not about calculating too deep, but trying to assess it in a logical way. Will I be able to play this position without castle short? Unlikely. Do I know where to put the c1 bishop? Not yet. Could go to d2, in some positions to g5. So first things first. I'm castling, then I'll see where to put the bishop. And after castle short, black says, okay, now no h4s, no long castle, so I'm castling short myself. That's what has happened.
Yes, and that's the more precise move order, as Evgeny pointed out earlier, in case you're just joining, that bishop d7 is a better move order, or smarter in this case, because castle kingside immediately for black, while the white king was still on e1, could have tempted white to push e5, h4, and go for an attack on the kingside without castling kingside.
Yeah, like say he does this, which pretty much seems to be the same thing if white castles, but no, white goes h4, and then in case of bishop to c6, for instance, it might already be possible to sacrifice the bishop on h7, the well-known Greek gift, they call it?
Yes.
Okay, the variation of a Greek gift because of this h4, right?
It is a very instructive position,
knight g5 check. And no, I think it's not possible. Now I realized it's not possible.
Let's show it why it's not possible.
King g8, yeah, because interestingly, everyone knows that. Yeah, knight g5, queen h5, checkmate.
Yeah.
And people start checking, usually, if you sacrifice on h7, people start checking king g6, king h8, sometimes forgetting about that king can return to g8. And over
Queen
here,
E5.
it's a check on e5. And it's not only the check on e5, it wouldn't be a disaster per se, but there is queen f5 guarding h7. And that's a very, very common thing people miss.
Both queen to f5 or bishop e4.
Bishop e4 guarding h7, yeah. So that was overly optimistic.
Yeah, don't get carried away with the sacrifice.
But still, well, we go knight g5. That's another possible way of playing this position. Then g6 is super dangerous. I suspect knight h7 might be already working, or just an h5 move. But
let's check it for fun.
Knight h7,
knight
king h7, and h5. And here I'm worried for black, seriously.
Oh, it looks like 1-0.
Yeah.
So
you move
h6,
the king,
g6
he takes,
is a gigantic threat here.
Yeah, so he has to play h6, and then I just wanted to... I'm not sure, what the position is and how to assess it. Just what I want to point out, this knight from g5 is unlikely to leave from here anytime soon. So what white does, he puts the bishop on f4. If you want to take, you won't enjoy it. So takes, rook h8 is already a very big threat. So anyhow, we probably shouldn't delve too much into detail of that one, but indeed bishop d7, castle short, wait for white's castle short, and then castle short yourself seems to be a better move order. But Rudolf says, you know what, I'm still playing e5.
Similar idea, so there could be still a kingside attack with this d3 bishop already aiming at h7. Queen e4 is possible, queen bishop battery, knight g5 is a possibility too. So this is looking like an attractive position for white, where you can have a slightly better position and put pressure on your opponent.
Yeah, right. And now, honestly, I'm thinking about Maxim's play, and I'm not sure if he has to be satisfied already here. Well, he moved 11. It could be that something already went wrong, because bishop c6, which is the most natural move, right? Because one would say knight c6, but since you've played bishop d7, bishop does nothing on d7. You have to put it on c6. Knight c6 is, well, possible, but then what about this bishop on d7? What it's doing? And,
yes, miscoordination.
And white does something like this immediately. Queen e4 forces g6, puts the bishop on h6. So, well, very, very promising position for white. Yeah, rook. Don't know where it goes, e8, d8, and white just goes h4, puts the pawn on h5, knight on g5. That's dangerous, right? And while maybe white doesn't have anything on immediate, black has no counterplay whatsoever. What's black counterplay? It's like you go queen b6 and try to take some pawn, but your king will be mated by then.
Yeah.
So that seems to be not an option. Therefore, bishop c6, at least to cover e4 square, not to let white to regroup the pieces. And then even a simplistic way of playing, which is knight g5.
Immediate attack plus queen h5 is a possibility.
I suspect black will have to take. I suspect black will have to take. And so that's at once two bishops for white. And honestly, very dangerous position. Yes. Still there is an attack. Knight d7, white goes some rook to e1. I'm not sure. Perhaps this rook to e1. It's unlikely that the rook from f1 will have any better prospects. And still ready to go queen h5. In some positions, bishop f6 looks dangerous for Maxim. So
it does, and I think we can only praise the opening preparation of Timur Rajabov, or in this case, the choice. It's not like this is a new idea, but he chose very well for today. How often do we get to see the world number 6, Maxim Veselagrov, feeling uncomfortable after 10 moves?
Yeah, and well, that's a mystery. That's a mystery choice from Maxim, because he played queen c7 relatively quickly, but then if you play this kind of move, and once again, I'm returning back that there is nothing wrong with swapping the queens on d1. If you play this kind of move, at least you have to know what do you do next. This, for the time being, it does seem to be very attractive for Rajabov. He might be surprised himself, because I believe when he arrived at the game, when he started the game, the main goals, the main idea would be, I want to be solid, I don't want to have any chance to lose. And that's pretty much what would happen if a black trades the queens on d1. But now, yes, White's position seems to be promising, but it could be that Radjabov is kind of his mood, his, his objective for the game is, he might be not ready to play in this, even though so far it looks very logical what he's doing.
Look at Maxim's facial expressions. It's really the man who isn't just not feeling comfortable, but is also quite puzzled on what's next. And that is what Evgeny already pointed out, that if you play bishop d7, you want that bishop on c6. But it's quite many tempi to develop your pieces, plus knight g5 is an immediate threat already.
Knight g5, yeah. Well, maybe h6.
And just not care.
Yeah, maybe h6. And wow, I don't know. It's like, this is what bothered me, to be honest. Knight h7 and rook goes and knight f6 check. Maybe it's just a bluff, but it looks very dangerous.
It does look dangerous. Let's have a look at g6.
Well, I suspect if you take with the bishop, White is just happy because he didn't even invest a pawn, right? gf6, bishop. So you're in a way forced to accept the gift. But then bishop h6 happens. Queen g4 is a threat, or should I start with queen g4 first, followed by bishop h6? I'm not sure if Black will survive that.
It could be a very exciting attacking position with this piece sacrifice.
He goes there, we give a check, and he checks all the time, collect more stuff. Then rook d1, that look, well, at least, not delving too much. That I'd be scared. Again, that's game 2 of the semifinals. I want to be as solid as possible. I don't want my opponent having fun with my king somewhere around d7. So.
Yeah. According to Neil, Maxim played this twice already, the queen c7 move in that position, and drew both of his games against somewhat lower-rated grandmasters. Thank you so much for the stats, Neil. Lorinda, shout out to Lorinda for his help as usual.
Yeah, right. But now, again, I mean, it's not like the previous results. I think it's just I don't like the position, and.
Yeah, he's saying that it's gone further south since then. So it's not the same position.
It's not the same position. He never had the same position. Well, then I'm interested to know what else White could have played there. Because e3, e4 is the move you basically play. Maybe it was... now that I'm thinking about this e5 being, weak in the light squares and everything, it could be that it's still playable for Black. Maybe e5 is what he had to do. Again, it's weird to criticize almost a 2800 grandmaster on move 7,
But we are here to do that.
But it's...
Of course, we are not claiming that we could have done any better than Maxim. I would have lost this game in 5 moves, but we are trying to figure out what went wrong for the Frenchman, because his position now, after only 10 moves, is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it might be defendable. Again, maybe I'm just speaking too soon, but I don't think he enjoyed it himself. So once again, if we look at Maxim's repertoire, it's the Grunfeld and the Najdov, meaning fighting for initiative from the very first moves. So his opening repertoire is not, it doesn't have lines where he's giving his opponent a chance to attack. And
indeed.
Yeah, so that's something.
Yeah, and that's what John Linus is pointing out also in the Twitch chat. Shout out to all of you tuning in on YouTube and Twitch. We do try to keep an eye on your comments, so make sure to ask your questions, tell us about the games. But according to John, yes, that Maxim is a bookworm and usually his preparation is amazing. So he says he's worried that now Maxim is taking his time. He usually plays faster. I fully agree with you, John, that this is not a good sign for fans of the Frenchman. We are not saying he is in any danger just yet, but definitely he is not feeling very happy about the outcome of the opening.
Yeah, so, and for Radjabov, I don't know if we can call it being smart in the preparation, or maybe partially it could be that he got a bit lucky. Can we say that? Because still, the endgame that was possible to play for black is much less, say, much less challenging for the black side. I believe what they do, they trade and. But then again, if you don't know, that I believe was the game between Swidler and Rajabov. So Bishop, or Rajabov Swidler, Peter played with the black pieces. So something like Bishop F5 trying to stop E4, White goes Knight D2, I guess. Then later on E4 develops the bishop. It's, in a way, pretty much the similar idea, having the pawn on E4 and opting at some point to play E5. And if black plays E5 sooner or later, say, King C2, E5, then try to use the D5 square, like Bishop to C4, Knight to F1, E3, and land one of those on D5.
At least in these positions, there are no queens and kingside attack after E5. Queen E4, Knight G5, all those moves are coming for white. But it is Maxim who decided to keep the queens on the board. Was that a sign of being ambitious? Is it that he is not comfortable in those endgames as much as he should?
Could be as well, yeah. Could be as well, but now it looks like black's choice was to keep the queens on the board, just to figure out a few moves later that, in fact, maybe it wasn't the right choice.
Now he wishes he could change the move and trade queens.
Well, in fact, in this structure, if you imagine that queens disappear from the board, black is fine, because this E5 pawn, as long as there is no kingside attack, it is kind of too far advanced, overextended, right? And then, in fact, black's setup with bishop C6 and knight to D7 would make perfect sense, because attacking threatening to trade the knight on F3 and taking the pawn on E5, that would be absolutely normal course of events. And I suggest we switch to the other game.
Sure. We're going to leave Maxim thinking about bishop C6 or knight C6 or any alternative. And here, wow, a couple of moves have been played.
Precisely. A bit more than a couple, Anna.
Wait a second. One more time, H4, rook H3.
Yeah, but the full sentence that I wanted to say, let's switch to the other game while it's still in progress, because I suspect both guys know what they're doing. Typically in this line of the Nimzo, if you know what you are doing, you know what happens. I mean, that's very likely a draw. So let's see, let's catch up quickly. Bishop G5, Rook D1, that was in one of the games between Evgeny and Vityukov, I believe. Knight to D7, Knight E5, H6, Bishop H4, all that we remember.
The very same. He played Rook D1 in one of the games against Vityukov and Rook C1 in the other game, and now back to Rook D1.
C7, C5, and in one of the games there was something with Knight G4, if you remember. But that was with Rook on C1. So
that was the other one, and
different.
Bishop F6, Knight D7,
Knight D7, Bishop F6, DC5, all that was played. H4, Rook D8, takes over here, Rook H3. Once again, he has taken on D8, keeping the castle right. Remember our discussion,
It's the same position, isn't it?
Rook D5, perhaps, is not the same move.
Until here, I would think it's the same as in the Vityukov game.
It's the same as Vityukov's game. And what the move was?
Let me double check that, but I think it's the same.
Or something? Yeah, if you could check what was happening in the quarter-final match. I believe that was a classical game with Rook D1.
The classical game, it ended in a draw, but it was an interesting position, and they seem to be repeating the very same.
Yeah, so what happened there was Rook to D5, Rook G3 check, King F8, Rook to C3, and... well, I don't see anything. Rook takes C5. What's the problem? Trade on C3. Is it just a draw? We might lose one of our games right now.
Oh no, I don't want to.
Seems like it will be a very quick draw. So we found the game, yeah?
Yeah, let me just check where they deviate from the Yulian Vichugov game in the semifinals?
Move 15.
I mean quarterfinals, sorry.
Move 15 is the same position. Yeah, bishop d5 instead of
d5.
rook d5 was played. Yes, I was right, it seems. Bishop d5 was played by Nikita Vitigov,
And it seems to have been a mistake, so obviously Ding Liren is not repeating a move that may not have been the most precise.
Oh well, so bishop d5 wasn't the best move according to our brief analysis with the online engine. So rook d5, and the fact that he played it very quickly suggests that that perhaps is the best move in the game. So a check, king f8, rook c3, and now I'm trying to comprehend what's the actual idea is, because I don't see what stops black from taking the c5 pawn. And after the queen is... not even sure where the queen is going. Say queen b4 trying to pin the rook, right? So there is no rook c3 right now.
But a5
a5 is still there, right? So rook takes... I think queen takes is good enough. Queen takes should be good enough. And yes, black's pawn structure is not ideal, but white has no pieces to play. King gets there. Should be just a draw.
Yes, unfortunately, this is not one of the most exciting games of the World Cup, but on the other board, there could be an exciting attack, Maxim not being comfortable. There is going to be fight in the match between Timur Rajabov and Maxim Veselagrov.
Yeah, right. Well, Maxim eventually has made the move. Yeah, we have shown Ding and Rook C5 play. Yeah, well, let's see. Let's see this one. Yeah, just.
Yeah, let's see how quickly they play, and
yeah,
if they
Rook
don't.
takes Queen B4.
Right, Queen
yeah,
B4.
precisely that. And then, not that you are forced to play A5. I mean, there is nothing wrong with playing A5, but you aren't forced to play A5. But he will. He will. So I'm really not sure. It's like Yu Yang-yi, I've mentioned that, yes, that Yu Yang-yi, despite being somewhat lower rated, he is a very good rapid and blitz player, low rated compared to Ding Liren, right? Like
Yeah, we're talking about the world number 3 versus the world number 10.
Yeah. He is very good rapid and blitz player, which was shown once again in the Grand Chess Tour, where Ding Liren is a part of the tour and Yu Yang-yi was the wild card for St. Louis Rapid and Blitz event, and they shared the second place. So
Indeed,
it was joint second after Levon Aronian. Yeah.
Yu Yang-yi hasn't had many chances before in super tournaments. This year is being his year. So far he was invited to the Altibox Norway Chess Tournament. He did well there, and also in the Grand Chess Tour, as you mentioned, at the Singfield Cup. So he is proving that that's where he belongs, and now already by rating he is world number 10. So he's going up the ladder and trying to catch up with his compatriot Ding Liren, who is the first Chinese player to ever cross 2,800.
And yeah, well, you
First
know,
and only player at the moment.
yeah, right. But the thing is that this 28 magical mark, magical number, it's a lot of players who cross it. I mean, well, not a lot. I mean, I don't know how many in the history.
It's a handful only.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like we think Shak Mamedyarov, Anish Giri at some point had 20. Did he? I'm not sure. I mean, he was very, very close.
I think he crossed it briefly and then went back
but
below.
a lot of. And Ding Liren seems like he's here to stay, like 28-5, 28-10, and he's not. It's not that easy to push back the guy who barely loses a game.
That's very true. What we could do is that if we leave the camera on the two Chinese grandmasters,
just not to miss, not to miss the moment when they'll agree a draw.
Just in case there's a handshake, but we're gonna look at the position between Rajabov and Veselagrov.
Yeah.
Maxim made a move, bishop c6.
Bishop to c6. Yeah, is it good or bad? But you have to justify the bishop's move to d7. Yeah. So bishop to c6, and Rajabov is thinking he's not forced to go for this knight to g5 thing. He can play slower. he can play a bishop to f4. That's the other thing I've mentioned. Bishop to f4, rook a to d1, and then continue. Sometimes you would actually want, if knight g5 is not such a great idea, or say black would play h7, h6 to stop knight g5. Sometimes you want to just move the knight back in order to free, this diagonal, so to get the queen on g4 and then possibly return with the knight. Okay, bishop g6, but knight g5 was played.
Knight g5, immediate threat, and we shall see whether black wants to take on g5 or push h6.
Yeah, I suspect Maxim will try to make h6 work. So once again, he's not the type of a player who would take on g5 and try to defend passively. Or, well, maybe not passively, but it's like carefully, right? That's not what he's doing. He's all about counterplay.
That is true. So we're going to see whether he will play quickly, because knight g5 is a move that he must have.
Yeah, that's what you anticipate. Yeah.
When you play bishop c6, you know that knight g5 will be coming.
Yeah, well, basically, that's what causes you to think before playing bishop c6, because that's a natural move since you played bishop d7, but what you might be afraid of is this knight's jump to g5. So it might as well be that Vyacheslav has already made his decision about knight g5. So we'll see.
Yeah, we're going to see that soon. And while we are waiting for Maxim to make a move, there is a confirmation from Chris about what we asked about Anish Giri's rating, that he did cross 2800 on the live rating list, but not on the FIDE list. Thank you, Chris.
That's what I was thinking. That I remember there was some buzz on Twitter, about Anish reaching 2800, but I wasn't sure if it was actually published. There was the same case with me and 27 mark.
I did the same with 2400.
Once in my life, I was on 2700 live, but never on the list.
Congratulations on that, Evgeny. Those of you, I always get the question, how did I get my international master title if my top rating was 2393? Well, I did cross 2400 on the live rating, and that counts enough, for the title. Luckily for me, because then I lost rating. I don't think I'll ever get back to 2400 because I'm not competing anymore, but I can say I had it on the live rating, and Anish had it 2800 on the live rating list. Evgeny crossed 2700, so kudos to Evgeny. You guys now know who is the commentator here.
Well, it was a long time ago. And then...
No. You could still participate and knock these guys out, Evgeny. I'm going to stay here in the studio alone.
Yeah, if they'll give me a wild card to the final, then I'll feel obliged.
A wild card to the candidates.
H7, H6 was played by Maxim Vyacheslav, so our guess was right. Not sure if the move is right, though, because, as I said, knight to H7 and all this knight F6 business does look scary.
It is scary, but Maxim doesn't seem to be that scared, or he's hiding it very well. He did go for bishop c6 and h6.
Well, one of the things to do for white, now that I've spotted which might be an interesting idea, we play bishop h7 check, which seems to be pointless, drive the king to h8, and then move the bishop back, but not to d3, but c2. What's all about, one might ask? Point being, the knight, of course, cannot be taken with the pawn because of queen h5 check and then queen h7 checkmate. You can take with the bishop, but it's not all that different from the position that we've considered to be much better for white with the pair of bishops. And if you go back to g8, that's an important difference between having the bishop on c2 or d3. There is a move queen d3 for white, threatening a threat. Basically, threatening a threat. That's what the game of chess.
It's a big threat.
That's what the game of chess is all about. You're threatening a threat. You're checking with a check, and so on.
Check and a check. Checkmate a checkmate.
Yeah. So
that's
queen
the
h7,
objective, basically.
g6, and I believe knight e6 seals the deal in white's favor.
Yeah, let's just show it because it's pretty. F takes e6,
takes,
not possible.
Otherwise you just lose tons of material, but this way it's
mate into
checkmate on h7. So therefore, as well as this knight h7 that we've already outlined as being quite a promising looking continuation for white, there is this quirky check and go back approach. Because yeah, it does work after king g8, but seemingly it works after knight d7 as well. Queen d3, and what do you do? It's like g6 is your move, and then knight e6. Ah, no, wait, that was, no. It wasn't silly. It was silly, but not silly, in fact, because I've blundered.
Did you?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes people blunder and get lucky with it because it still works. Because I thought it's the same checkmate. It's not obviously the same checkmate because queen g6 comes without a check. But I still don't see a defense for black.
There is no defense. The f6 square is covered, and the c7 queen is not helping much either.
Yeah, right. So knight d7 wouldn't be possible. Oh, well, and you know what? You know what? That's on the board. Check on h7,
kidding?
bishop
Wait,
on c2.
whoa,
Yeah.
this is heating up. So bishop h7, king h8, bishop back to c2.
Bishop back to c2 to have an option of queen d3.
Wow. This is only move 14, and Rajab is putting the world number 6, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, under serious pressure.
Yeah, right. And honestly, I'm not sure if Maxim is enjoying it.
I don't think he's enjoying this at all.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm afraid he will end up taking on g5, and that would be an inferior version to, in fact, to the immediate capture on g5, it seems, because he has played h6. Right, I mean, taking on g5 with the bishop, of course, not with the pawn, because we've already mentioned it's checkmate after queen h5 check. So takes, and then, say, after knight d7, white has a choice. He can play rook e1, can he? That's not clear, right? Because I thought rook e1 is safe and everything, but queen e5 might be an issue. Queen e5, and when you trade everything, black takes. Yeah, okay, knight d7. Bishop f4, good enough, or there is bishop e7 targeting the rook. And after rook e8, I suspect the exchange sacrifice is at least dubious. Bishop d6. And then white has the prospects of pushing the f-pawn forward. Still the same good old battery with queen d3 is there. And, well, having the bishop on d6 really helps, restricting black's potential counterplay.
Pair of bishops, more space, and still kingside attack for white. This is looking very promising for Rajabov, and that makes us wonder about the same thing that we were discussing already. Where did the Frenchman go wrong? Queen c7, he played twice already, so that's not like a mistake in itself, but then the follow-up after queen c7, if we can just go through those moves again.
Queen c7, e4, and I really suspect that e5, even though it doesn't look that great, could have been the continuation. Or perhaps even more precise would be to play some move like knight c6.
Wait with the pawn whether e6 or e5.
And if white plays bishop d3 as he does in the game, right? Well, you actually could have been smart with black. Yeah, you get knight c6, and now let's see, because for this setup with pawn on e5, white of course wants to have the bishop on c4. For the setup with e6, white wants bishop d2. Well, that's actually what happened in the game. Bishop d3, queen e2, and so on. So you wait for this bishop, and that's the most natural move in the position. You move the bishop from f1. And accordingly to what white does, after bishop c4, I believe, e6 is much less scary, because in all those lines, the bishop is on c4, so it's basically you'll enter the same position with tempo up, because bishop has nothing to do on c4 if black puts the pawns on f7 and e6. Yeah. And by the same token, in this version, you go e5, and still you're claiming I'm half of tempo up, because, well, where you want your bishop to be is c4.
We do have a move by the Frenchman, and that's not a trade on g5.
We do have a move?
Yes.
Which is c4.
Interesting.
c4, an attempt to... Well, he basically covers the d3 square.
And the e4 square is covered by the bishop.
Yeah, to prevent. And now I'm starting to think, so could it be that bishop b1, as old as it looks, could have been a better move?
Then bishop to c2.
It's kind of, it's much more awkward, because the rook from a1, it's kind of blocked and so on. But that's a very direct threat. to which c4 would have been not enough to respond
Because
with.
of queen c2.
Because not only it's queen d3, but queen c2 as well. Queen c2 wins the game on a spot. G6, knight e6, we've already seen this line in the with the queen on d3.
Very instructive. It doesn't mean that bishop b1 would have won the game, but now it shows that there's quite a difference between those two bishop moves. Taking into account c4, do you think that Rajabov may have missed c4?
Well, he might have, even though I don't think he has reasons to be worried. His position still seems to be very, very nice, and apart from many other things, how about losing a tempo? Still playing? What's your defense against queen c2? I mean, basically, that's the question.
So the knight is still untouchable. H takes g5 leads to mating too. White will, in the future, want to take on c4 if he doesn't give mate. So that pawn is in the air.
But for the time being, queen c2 is the threat.
A very big threat.
So once again, he will probably have to play knight d7. I've actually missed a simple continuation there. Because one of the things white can do is queen c2, threaten the same thing, force g6, take the pawn with the tempo, and then guard his own f4 pawn.
Yeah.
It's awkward for the time being. The bishop is on b1, but it's a pawn up, two bishops, weak king. Okay. But yeah, indeed, I think bishop b1 was in fact, now that I'm thinking of it, there haven't been a single line in this attack that we would use an a1 rook, right? So even though it's counterintuitive to put the bishop on b1, kind of separating the rooks, well, there's a lot of stuff being said about connecting the rooks. No, you separate the rooks.
Forget about the basics.
Bishop b1. Yeah, well, that's primitive. Nobody does that anymore.
Who cares about the fundamental rules of chess?
Yeah, nobody does it anymore. I agree. Yeah, but really, seriously, bishop b1 might have been a slight improvement on Rajabov's play, which is still fine, it seems, because, white seems better to me even in this case.
So even with the loss of a tempo, bishop from c2 to b1, this seems to be a very promising attack for white.
Yeah, right. I mean, what does black do about this queen c2? Because now you can't... There are three squares, right? Okay, d3 is gone because it's covered with the pawn. But those two you cannot cover in the same time. It's awkward. It's awkward, that's what it is. G6, okay, maybe G6 is the move, in fact.
And Rajabov is calculating, he's very focused.
Could be that G6 is... Not that I'm very happy with this position, to be honest, because still you'd be forced to guard those pawns again after, say, knight f3 or possibly even knight h3. Sometimes that's the move. So you are not blocking the access for your queen to g4, and knight might go to f4 just to be sacrificed on g6 or e6, something like that. Yeah, it might be really scary. So Rajabov clearly feels, I mean, it doesn't matter if his intentions were to have a solid game and make a draw. He's a classy player, so he certainly feels that that's the moment, that's the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the chance...
Is there any chance in the other match?
Is there a chance in the other game? Yeah. Well, rook c5, queen b4, king g7 was played. And after rook takes c5... I was a bit surprised that black decided to take with the pawn. There is nothing wrong with it. It's just that, does he really want to try to play for a win in this position? Queen c3 and queen h2.
Well, he's claiming that he's now attacking two pawns.
What's queen h2? I don't quite understand. Could it be that I'm actually underestimating this? Could it be that this, for some mysterious reason, Ding Liren finds it to be a dangerous position?
Could be the vulnerable c5 pawn, but it's not easy to attack it. King d2,
Yeah, well,
king c3, bishop d5, or bishop a6 would stop it.
It's like I thought maybe the fact that the pawn is on f7, the doubled pawns, white gets the king to c3, you will probably have to get yours to d6 to be next to c5 pawn, and then he'd play e3, g3, bishop there, bishop to h5. But it's like really, really far away, and it seems black would be able to react in proper way and hold it. So
perhaps his thinking is that a queen endgame is easier, and that's what he went for. So he traded the c pawn for the g2 pawn and the bishops, because in a queen endgame with the possibility of perpetual checks, this doesn't seem to be dangerous at all. So white can take on a7, but will that white king ever manage to escape from the checks?
That's one thing, that it could be that's just a straight up perpetual, or
you take on h4 and play for a win.
That's what. No, well, you probably don't really play for a win. It will be a question of whose pawn is running faster, right? It's not necessarily
Quality
black's
over
pawn.
quantity.
Yeah, not necessarily black's pawn, but the thing is with those pawns running on both sides, that maybe your opponent's pawn is promoting like one step further, but you're always going to have a perpetual. Because in order to support this pawn, well, queens is such a piece so that queen does, well, the job of, at the same time, attacking the king, or, well, not for the checkmate, but for the perpetual, and stop the pawns. So in order, say, to get this pawn to b7, from b7 to b8, you will have to have the queen, the white queen, around this pawn. But that means your king left unprotected, and they're always going to be a perpetual. So I believe not a lot of worries for Ding Liren there, indeed. And he's thinking, queen h1 played, king to d2, obviously. That's the only legal move available in the position. And I suspect queen h4 is what you do. And meanwhile, Rajabov has played the move. It was not bishop b1. It was not bishop b1. It was rook to e1. So now I'm curious what happens next in this game, because at least Maxim Vyshelograf will be able to play knight d7. And now king d2. Yeah, I mean, I'm once again looking at the camera. Check and check from d5. Is it just a perpetual?
So if king c2, queen to... actually, there are a couple of options.
Yeah?
I was looking at queen c4 and then king b1.
King b1.
Queen e4.
Queen e4.
Yeah, king a1, you hide for a moment, but does that help me?
You still have this.
Yeah,
so
and then back to d5, king a2.
So in fact, the king on a1 the king cannot hide on a1 if if black gives checks from the proper squares, right? Check from here, and check from here, and check from here, and we've already been there.
This is leading to a perpetual check.
So it could be trying to run to c3, and then b4, and there is a check from e4 still.
Yes, and if king a5...
Then check from d5. I believe that's how computer gives those perpetual checks. Yeah. Because once again, let's show. After king a1, let's make it so that those moves do not make such a lot of sense, but just to show. So this is a perpetual check for human. Queen c2, queen c1.
Yeah.
In this position, I know there is perpetual check.
Yes.
But it could be that, you turn in on the engine and it says 0, 0, 0, and it would be a perpetual check like all over the board, with sometimes playing some tricky, very precise moves. So the king gets, say, all the way to b6, and then you give a proper check, and king has to return all the way back to d2. So while it might not be seen just yet, I seriously suspect that Ding Liren either have calculated or possibly knows that this is a perpetual check, because I still don't see what would be wrong with capturing the pawn on h4 if you don't have the perpetual check after queen d5.
Now, after queen d5 check and no way to escape from perpetual checks, if Ding Liren wants to, he will go for the perpetual. I don't think there's a way for him to continue the game. I mean, he can go and take either the h4 pawn or the e2 pawns, but that will not change the evaluation of the game.
It might actually change, because at first...
You think so?
Yeah, at first, when we were discussing this king c2, before realizing that there is... there's this check, queen e4 and then queen h1. Yeah, that's how we made a perpetual.
Yes.
And before that, I was thinking, what happens if black captures on e2? And while it might still be nothing wrong for white, but now, even though the material is equal, black doesn't have like a side-passed pawn. And the e-pawns, e-pawn, which is the passed pawn candidate for black, is not that far from the white king. So that was a very clumsy explanation. What I'm trying to say, white can start speculating on queen straight.
Oh,
right?
yeah, in that sense, What I meant is that black can't really play this for a win, so why risk the game?
So that's what I'm saying. So black takes only two, but it's only white who will be, who will have chances. White will never lose, because, he, at the very least, he will always threaten to trade the queens.
With you, yes. So what we're trying to show here is that even if Ding Liren would take one of the pawns, the only player that can try to win this is white.
So king to c3 played, queen c6. Yes, I believe our guess was right, and there is just a straight-up perpetual.
And that will lead to a handshake very soon. Actually, they can also offer a draw in a few moves. We are on move 28. The players cannot offer a draw on their move 31. And while we are waiting for the next checks in the game between the two Chinese grandmasters, let's just check what Maxime played. Or first of all, Rajabov, who didn't go bishop b1. We could leave the camera on the game of the Chinese grandmasters, I believe.
Yes, only one move was played. Rook to e1 played by Rajabov. Maxime is still thinking there. And here, I believe we have a repetition in the other game of semi-final, in the game between Yu Yangyi and Ding Liren. Yeah, so back to d2 and queen back to d5. So that'd be a pretty short game, it seems.
That will mean that the two Chinese grandmasters will be back tomorrow for a rapid and potentially blitz tiebreak too, if there's no result after the first portion. That is a longer rapid game, 25 minutes plus 10 seconds, then a second rapid mini-match, 10 plus 10, time control there. And yes, this is going to be a handshake very shortly.
Yeah, so second time king c3. And a draw agreed. Did they make it threefold repetition? Because I don't... they've reached move 30, so very safe, double insurance. That's a perpetual check on the board, plus it's move 30, so you can actually agree a draw. So two draws in the game in the match between Yu Yangyi and Ding Liren. Well, yesterday perhaps Yu Yangyi has missed some chances with black, which was, I believe he was surprised himself of getting chances with black against Ding Liren. Oh,
and we had a drawing of colors for tomorrow.
So Ding will have
the black pieces
in the first. So basically repeating today's game color in his first rapid playoff. So, but I was saying that yesterday it seems that Yu Yangyi missed some chances. Well, it wasn't much. It wasn't like he was winning. But black certainly had initiative at some point. It's just that he didn't expect himself, I believe, after having such a tough tiebreak against Witigov and coming to the game with black against the top seed of the tournament. The first thing you say, okay, I'm so tired. The guy arguably is well prepared. Perhaps I have to stay as solid as possible. And then after 10 moves, you are better, but maybe still didn't switch on the aggression, let's say. And it was a draw. And today, that was his choice, basically, to make it, to play it as solid as possible, basically going for a drawish line if black knows it. And that was no surprise for Ding Liren, because the same line was played in the semifinals. So we are left, after 1 hour of play, we are left with one game only, which does develop in a much more interesting fashion.
Yes, luckily for us, even though it's only one game, this position could be on fire. We were analyzing earlier Evgeny's move, bishop b1. Instead, rook e1 was the choice of Timur Rajabov.
Yeah, but once again, I'm returning to this position. Indeed, would Rajabov play bishop b1 immediately? What's the punish for that? I don't really see. Well, perhaps still g6, since I've discovered this g6 move. Yeah, g6 is the move you play. And it still looks quite dangerous, but yeah, black seemingly doesn't have any other choice. So bishop to c2, c4, rook e1, guarding just in case the e5 pawn for one more time. And Maxime, once again, he's not very comfortable. And now the question would be, can he play knight d7? I don't see the reason why he cannot. But white might want to continue with queen h5, attacking f7, and then various lines like this. Knight takes e5, because it's not that easy to protect f7, oddly enough.
Well,
right?
if knight e5, rook e5?
Yeah. Well, rook e5 just wins. You're absolutely right.
We'll just bring tricky
queen e5,
here.
knight f7. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, and then bishop takes, you take with the rook.
Yeah, we're going to analyze this position further, but first we have an interview with the two Chinese players.
Oh, yeah. Let them explain themselves.
And we have the interview with Yu Yanyi and Din Lezheng. You had quite a short day in the office today, so it was a short draw for you, and now you are going to play on tiebreak. So how do you estimate your chances there?
I'm happy to draw with black pieces, and today we follow the game. We follow his game against Rudolf in the classical part, and I improve with rook d5. It's also the computer's first choice, and after this, it's more or less equal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was afraid some preparation by him, but maybe not so special. Yeah.
So now you are going to play on tiebreak. How do you estimate your chances there?
Yes, we played many rapid and blitz games recently, and sometimes I win and sometimes he wins, so the results are a little bit balanced.
Yes, and for you, so are you looking forward for rapid?
Yeah, I don't know, difficult question. I think maybe, I don't know, equal. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And in general, do you like to play classical chess or rapid chess or blitz more, or which kind of chess?
Recently, I play very good in faster time control. And it seems my classical rating has dropped a bit, but my rapid and blitz rating has improved a lot.
Yes, and Yanni, what about you? Do you like blitz, rapid, or classical chess more? Maybe Fischer random?
No, Fischer, no. I didn't play Fischer. I think maybe rapid blitz, maybe more. Yeah, okay.
So now we are going to see a great fight tomorrow. So good luck to you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The two Chinese grandmasters will be back tomorrow for the tiebreaks. Ding Liren is confident about his rapid and blitz skills, but so is Yu Yangyi. They both had wins and losses against each other recently at the Grand Chess Tour Rapid and Blitz.
Right, and while we had an interview with the players. I was checking the other game, and you know what? Engine is very, very optimistic for a Jabov. So it's more than 1 pawn. So plus 150. Well, it's always tricky, right? I mean, it depends on the depth the engine works. But it's clear, because it's someone I was wondering, after all, we are talking about Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. It's move 15. How could he have such a terrible position? That was my opinion, but his position, it's terrible. So
150 over 15.
Something like that, 150.
That's quite a big advantage for seeing only 14.5 moves being played, or now this is move 15.
Yeah, rook e1 and queen d8 was the move for Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. Well, hoping to take on g5, I suspect. So now it's the time for white to decide on what he's doing with this knight on g5. I suspect h4 is good enough. Because, yeah, once again, black won't be able to take. And, you know, potentially if black ends up playing g6, then having the pawn on h4 is actually a good thing, because at some point he'll play h4, h5. So I'm looking at some position like that. Knight h3. As I said, I still want to be able to put the queen on g4, therefore to h3 and not to f3. If black captures on h4, white can take on h6, then other rook goes to d1. Black seemingly doesn't have time to play knight d7 to finish the development. And you know, if it's move 15 and you've already played queen c7 and then returned back to d8, that means something's wrong with your position.
Absolutely. The Frenchman must have gone wrong in the opening stage. We couldn't point at the exact moment. Well, we have some ideas where it went wrong, starting with his decision of choosing queen c7 over queen takes d1, which he already did twice, so it's not a mistake in itself, but he seems to not be that well prepared in this exact variation. And that, once again, leaves us praising Radjabov's choice for the opening. He was very smart in his choice against Jeffrey Xiong.
Absolutely.
It was a subline of the Grunfeld defense, and Jeffrey was caught basically out of preparation, and he knows his theory very well. So good choice by Radjabov in that match, and today it seems to be once again a smart decision by the other grandmaster.
Yeah, right. And now the question is, after queen d8, white can play h4, as I said. It could be, well, I'm trying to understand what happens after rook d1, attacking the queen. Well, then probably he's playing knight d7. Yeah, that's the answer. Then he's playing knight d7. Okay. So h4 is one of the options. If white doesn't really want to go and to play anything crazy, now that the e5 pawn is not targeted, queen went back from c7, you can actually play knight e4, which is another very nice move, and it combines, you know, the tactical possibilities of still playing queen h5 and sacrificing on h6, delivering checkmate, with the positional idea of occupying the d6 square, like playing on knight d7. I mean, I would be looking, wrong piece, would be looking at queen h5.
We wish we could do that rook swing over to the h5.
Rook swing would be nice, yeah. Rook e1 to h3. Rook e1 to h3. Then I'm not playing knight e4. Then I'm doing it here. Rook e1 to h3 should be allowed once per game.
Then white is winning.
Oh, well, no, maybe he's not, because I've blundered the knight on g3. We got carried away. Now, anyhow, but the position after knight e4, knight d7, bishop f4, it's once again, it's clearly better for white, without white investing any material in it. Not a single pawn, because typically this is not here. A2 is not here, b2 is not here. White still doesn't care. White still is pretty much having a great position, great attack. But with material equal, that means black will have to survive all that. The kingside threats, the appearance of this knight on d6, the play on dark squares. And he's not allowed, I mean, what's good about having extra material in defense? That sometimes you can pay your price. Yes, I want my king to be safe, I want to trade the queens, maybe I can sacrifice a couple of pawns for that, so that at least I'm not getting checkmated. But now with material equal, he doesn't have this luxury. That's why we always talk about, I mean, how much did I sacrifice to get the initiative? And if it's the initiative, the strong attack with material equal, that of course makes defender's task even harder.
I think it's very instructive what you have described, that white has this position without any material sacrifice. So it would be normal to see a position like this, such initiative, after giving up a pawn or two. You can get this kind of initiative sometimes by playing a gambit. But here this is equal material and initiative and attack.
Well, sometimes I thought even not the gambit, but like say when we were discussing the lapping with the same structure, remember? So in our case, there was no pawn on c4 and no pawn on b2. So black at least has to have some factor in his favor. So in that lapping line, it is the pawn structure. So once again, it's a little bit thinner margin. You cannot really pay the price in terms of pawns or anything, but at least you have a hope. I'll trade the queens, I get to an endgame, and I'll have a pleasant endgame because my pawn structure is better. Here, it's nothing, absolutely not a single factor in black's favor. So that means that white's position is better, and it's better for long.
And that's the sad thing about pushing c4. Maxime pushed c4 to prevent queen d3, which was quite an essential threat. But now that pawn on c4 is struggling because it's going to be hanging and you can't really protect it comfortably. If you play b5, that will also create new weaknesses. So this is not a good pawn structure.
Kind of a scenario which I can imagine. Knight to e4, knight d7, and as I said, let's not get carried away with the attacks. Let's play bishop f4. Now, one of the ideas, white might as well say, I want the attack and the pawn, right? And if black plays b5, once again, another natural move. And those are the most dangerous positions, when your opponent is attacking you with fundamental moves, developing the pieces, putting stuff in the center. And if it does, apart from just, you know, just this check lists, I've castled short, I've brought my rook to the center, but it does the other stuff, it does attack. It does improve the business. That's dangerous. That means you really, really misplayed it. Because when we were discussing the rook lifts, right, and I said, okay, I want my rook on h3, which is a typical way to play. But if you fail to checkmate the king, the rook is misplaced. But in this position that I had on my analysis board here, white hardly has any piece which is misplaced. I mean, they work perfectly. I don't know. Something really bad happened to Maxime.
Great chances for the other grandmaster. I think for many of the viewers it was a surprise that Rajabov made it this far, but it looks like he's saying it's not just that I made it to the semifinals. I want to be in the finals. I have some
plans. I want to be in the final. I want to be in the candidates. Well, he had quite a rest from candidates since this disaster tournament in London. Yeah. And then, well, I mean, it's all on this game where he has a better position. He might today, unlike the other semi-finalists, he might as well say, well, you know, guys, I'm booking my tickets to candidates today after this game.
That seems to be his intention. And it's great to see that the other grandmaster came with such bold, brave intention of going for the win in the classical game. We could say that, in the opening there was the possibility of queen takes d1, but even in that endgame, white has chances to play for a win, so that was not a draw offered by Rajabov at all. And he did the same against Jeffrey when he explained in the interview that he was like, well, I can decide to play in the tiebreaks, but that's like quite a lottery whether I qualify or not, or I can try to win in the classical game, in that one final classical game, and that's what he did. He doesn't care that the world number 6 is his opponent today. Yeah, right. And you know what? Once again, coming back to Maxime's opening preparation, or pardon me, but it seems a lack of thereof, I think he misjudged or sort of mispredicted the approach. So he thought that they will have a very similar game that we had seen in the other semifinals. For some reason, I think Maxime felt like it won't be much of a game. I have to play my Grunfeld / Najdov. I'll have to get some position in. Because he didn't expect, in fact, queen c7, again, the move that you've mentioned was played already a couple of times by Maxime. I don't know. My feeling is he had to stop right here. And not try to recall the lines, because of course he's an expert. As I said, he has played and won the endgame after queen d1 against Magnus Carlsen. He has played queen c7, as it turns out. So not the move itself, but philosophically, just try to understand what does the
guy in front of me, Rudolf, what does he want from this game? Because, well, 3 more moves. And it seems, or 4 more moves, and it seems it was too late.
In this position, certainly, we do consider that Maxim's position was worse after only 10 moves. And I agree with you that it could have been also the psychological part where you think that your opponent, since he is lower rated, he is not as experienced at the very, very top tournaments anymore. Rajabov used to be a member of the super elite. From a young age, he was a prodigy. And then we discussed this, that at the candidates tournament back in London, it seems that was a breaking point in his career. And then he even stopped competing for quite some time. But now he's back, and his intention is to knock out the world number 6, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave.
Okay, so Queen D8, and Timur has played Knight H3, so not bothering with H4, not playing Knight E4. Knight H3, in a way, much more aggressive move, because remember what I was saying about putting the pieces naturally or in an artificial way, but more aggressive. So that is more aggressive approach, clearly. Queen H5, Queen H5, Bishop H6, 2 moves. Give me the chance to play those 2 moves, and I believe White has a crushing attack.
And the biggest problem in Maxim's position is that this E5 pawn is taking away lots of important squares, including the F6 square, which normally is a defending knight. So oftentimes there is no problem with this kind of attacks because you have a defender on F6, a knight.
Absolutely.
Or if you can't have it on F6, sometimes you can move your rook away and place a knight on F8. But here the B8 knight is very far from the defense, and the rest of the minor pieces too.
I don't even know what has to be his very next move. Because one of the ways you survive in such positions, at some point you play F7, F5. And you accept that White takes en passant, so you will have a war structure. But but you kind of get a piece activity for that. But playing F5 here, pardon me, but it doesn't make sense at all, because apart from both of those captures, White has Knight F4, hence Knight H3 was played. Getting access to all the, really all the squares. Knight E6, fork, Knight G6, fork, game over. So F5 is out of question here. One move later, however, it seems that F5 would be already too late. Because
after
Bishop H6. Bishop H6. Oh, well, perhaps I have to correct myself, because there, Black does have Queen E8, accepting the position pawn down.
Let's just show quickly what would have happened if you accept the piece sacrifice.
Yeah, that's what I want to show. Yeah, it's just that, well, perhaps if this happens, it's still a disaster, but the game is not over. That's the only, I believe it's a terrible position, but the game is not over. If he takes, I believe it's just over, and one of the ways to do it, I believe there should be multiple ways to do it. One of the ways to do it is Queen G6, King goes back, then you lift the Rook to E3, and you are threatening Knight G5 and Rook H3. And you are threatening Queen H5 and Rook G3. In too many ways, this king is getting checkmated. Queen to D5, played by Maxim Vachier-Lagrave pretty quickly after Knight H3. Queen to D5. After all, mate in 1 threat is
the first moment where Black is creating a threat, even if it's a very obvious one.
Black creates a threat of mate in 1. Well, the problem with it is that kind of more or less any sane move that guards the G2 square is good for White. Knight F4 with the tempo is what tempo. That's what I'm looking at.
So what does he want to do after Knight F4?
How do I know? Ask Maxim after the game if he survives.
Send him into a confessional booth. We need to build one here.
Yeah, but look, it does look terrible for Black, because I don't see. No, really. You're not planning to play back to D8 or D7, which arguably is even worse, because you take away the square from your knight. So apparently you're leaving the queen somewhere around the 5th rank. So C5, B5, not sure. Well, what I'm saying with white, I don't care where your queen is. It's
Queen H5.
H5, and then, yeah, well, which does a good job. Let me see. This, and maybe in case of, say, I'm moving the knight, planning to sacrifice on H6. I don't like this move, but just to illustrate, I mean, one of the possible ideas. That's a pin of 5th rank, and you know what the move is here? F5 might be tried. That's a funny pin. So
Yes,
you
so
can't
E6,
take
F6
2
is
pawns
not
on
possible.
5th rank. Yeah, but you can't take on F6 because your queen is taken. That's the funny pin which sometimes occurs in the Sicilian defense.
And how about bishop takes H6?
That's thanks for asking. I mean, that's bad for black. That's still, that's what I'm struggling. I can't imagine a single line where black gets away with it. It's like he either loses the c4 pawn, or he's getting checkmated, or both.
It's looking very, very
disastrous.
uncomfortable, if not lost at this point.
Looking disastrous. It's only move 16, so it could be nerves, you know.
Queen d5, I see that you guys are also not happy with that move by the Frenchman. We are looking at the Twitch chat and YouTube as well, so keep those comments coming. If you have any questions about the tournament, about these games, let us know and we'll try to address them. Also, while we are waiting for Rajabov to decide how to react to Queen d5 and whether to blunder mate or not, let me thank our sponsors, because this event would not be possible without the support of plenty of companies, including our general partner Gazprom Nethantos, the official airlines, UTair, the general media partner, Test News Agency, and Match TV, who is our media partner. Thank you so much for the support to all of those mentioned. And thanks to you guys for tuning in every single day and for supporting the players and keeping those great ideas in the chat, considering which move shall be played. And keep those comments coming, because we do care about your opinion.
Rajabov is still thinking, and apart from the obvious knight f4, the move with the tempo, he might consider queen g4 as well, which is a decent move.
Yeah, queen g4 is the suggestion on Twitch.
On Twitch, yeah. Twitch knows, I believe.
Twitch knows, YouTube knows, both chats are mentioning queen g4.
Yeah, just I wasn't sure what happens after knight d7, but perhaps you can do the same, go knight f4, or, now looking at it, could be bishop f4. You know, maybe you don't have to hurry up. You play bishop f4, you bring the rook to d1, once again, destroy this battery, bring all the pieces, and then sacrifice on h6 in the right moment.
He played knight f4.
He's played knight f4, right?
So queen g4 seems to have been a very good move, but knight f4 could as well be a really good move. We shall see. Yeah, it is big brain time in both chats. Thank you guys for the comments. And let's see whether this attack by Rajabov will lead to a full point. That would be an impressive result by Teimur, who made it to the semifinals by knocking out none other than his compatriot, Shahryar Mamedyarov. And that was a match where in the classical games they were both solid, they are teammates and good friends, but in the tiebreaks they of course had to go for it. One of them had to advance. And there was a lot of things happening on the tiebreak, and at some point Mamedyarov missed a win in one of the games. And Teimur proved to be stronger, right? So then it was this quarter-final versus Jeffrey Chung, and before that, that was a match against Daniil Yufa, which was won in a classical time control. Before that, it was the tiebreak against Sanan Sagirov. So, well, he has played quite a few tiebreaks, but it will be a victory for Rajabov. It won't be the first match he wins in classical chess. So, overall, very, very nice performance by. Indeed, and kudos to the other grandmaster one more time for his smart decision in terms of opening choice, because as we mentioned, it's barely ever that you get to see the Frenchman under such pressure, under only 10 moves. After 10 moves, the Frenchman was already in an uncomfortable position. Yeah, right. So let's see what Maxim Vachier-Graf does here. Queen to c5, perhaps, yeah?
It's not that much different. I mean, queen a5 is not a consideration because white can take the pawn.
Among many of them, with queen c5 is indeed a
queen
choice.
c5. Queen c5 is played. And now there is a feeling that white might have, a direct way to victory, pardon me.
It wouldn't be a surprise, and the factors are, this e5 pawn cuts the board into two, which means that the c5 queen and the c6 bishop and everything on the queen side are not participating in the defense of the black king. So if you get your queen to h5 and get to sacrifice on h6 or g6, get to the king somehow, there are no defenders.
Yeah, right. And now that I'm thinking, okay, we've played knight f4 with the tempo, driven the queen away from c5. Could it be that we are playing knight h5? That could be the other idea, to have, apart from the idea of sacrificing on h6, it could be as well that knight takes g7 is an idea, right? And queen d5 back. Now white changes his mind, goes for queen g4. I believe white is very close to winning, if not completely winning already.
Yeah, a line mentioned by Juicebold on Twitch is a really interesting one after knight f4, queen c5, queen g4, knight d7, bishop e3. It's just an illustration of how
bishop
things
e3?
can go wrong also on another square if queen takes e5, knight g6. That's what I was also trying to get somehow, to sacrifice the knight on g6. And after f takes, queen takes, king g8, bishop takes h6. It's a piece up for black, but it doesn't seem to be holding. If queen f6, queen h7, king f7, bishop g7.
Long
Very
line.
lengthy line. I just see because of the illustration.
Here, this, check on g6, right?
Yes.
Rook e6. That's
king
a computer
e6
line,
and you
though.
win the queen.
That's a computer line, though, and you win the queen, but for a whole bunch of pieces. And I suspect it is good for white if computer gives it.
Yeah, only +1 according to Juicebold, but it's an exciting line and illustrates how those sacrifices are possible. So on g6 you may see a sacrifice, on h6 we may expect a sacrifice, and there are simply not enough defending pieces around the black king. Yeah,
right. Well, is queen g4 really best move here? Can we ask chat?
If queen g4 is the best move. Yep. Twitch and YouTube, big brain time. What's the best move here, according to you guys?
Because, I've cheated, looked at the computer.
Don't tell them, though. We're going to wait for the answer in the chat. It's big brain time. I'm announcing big brain time. Queen g4 looks good, according to Roti. What else do you guys think? Tic-tac, Neil. Bishop d2.
Bishop
Another
d2
suggestion.
is one of the
King
moves.
f1, Sabik.
King f1.
Good joke.
Probably
a4.
a joke, I hope.
Bishop b1. Bishop b1 on YouTube as well. What else do you guys
That's the move
say?
I was thinking about, and then I double-checked it, and I'm not even sure which move is better. Yeah, I know that engine gives around +2 for white, and that I believe is correct assessment. And the more confusing fact is that, took a pick at like 3 lines, and all of them are very good. So it's not like there is only one move which is much better than the other. It's just that white's position is good. And
Bishop b1 is very popular on YouTube.
Because it's a good move. Because it's a good move.
Job, guys.
Bishop
good
b1
job.
and queen c2 once again. This threat. And I don't know what black's supposed to do. Because... Oh, wait a sec. It's trying to claim that I know what I'm doing. But then what do you do after g6? And after g6, that's the point. As soon as I provoke g6, I can play this bishop e3. That was the move I was missing all the time. I wanted to play bishop e3 right after queen c5. It doesn't work, yeah, because queen takes e5. Then one move later, it doesn't work. But if we play this, after knight d7, play this, threatening obviously mate in 1, g6 is the only move, and then this diagonal is free. So that the pawn on e5 cannot be taken with the bishop.
Yeah,
Bishop
bishop
e3,
e6
and if
seems
queen
strong.
leaves over there, I'm 100% sure I can take on g6.
Indeed. Yeah, if after g6 we can take immediately, there's a question on Twitch. Possibly, but if you can develop bishop e3 with a tempo and then take, that may be even better.
That was the issue. So we can take immediately, but then
Oh, because of f2. Okay.
it makes the variations much more complex, or could be just not working. Because now you could try to swap the moves, just kind of change the moves order, but then
queen
black gets extra options like going queen d5, so why would you need it? Well, in fact, this doesn't seem to work for white, because after queen g6 there is rook f7, and there is a threat of queen g2 which prevents you from taking the rook. And you know, so as a general advice, if you can improve your position and you're sure that your opponent can't do anything about it, so you start with developing yet another piece, bishop e3, guarding f2 so that nothing happens, and only then proceed to sacrifice the material under the most comfortable circumstances.
Yeah, and what you could see earlier on the camera is that not a lack of sleep by Timur Rajabov, but oftentimes these top players would look away from the board and calculate very lengthy lines. So sometimes it may be disturbing for them that the pieces are as they are on the board, and they simply picture the position blindfold and calculate blindfold. So he was closing his eyes, he is very focused, and he clearly is calculating forcing lines here, how to win, how to knock out Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. He was in depth 88, Rambon probably.
Yeah, but really, there's been a lot of examples, people not looking at the board while they're pondering over their move.
Yeah, Hikaru Nakamura is also famous for looking at the ceiling. He likes to observe the ceiling, how's the paint.
Peter Swidler was sometimes thinking with his either with his eyes closed or looking wherever it is he's looking, not at the board obviously. And there are examples like in tactical problems and so on where indeed if you're trying to work out the very lengthy line, that the current situation on the board might actually distract you. So it's easier to photograph the position in your, to have a print of the position in your brain, and then work from there.
Indeed, and that is what's happening right now, though Rajabov is now looking at the board, but he's definitely not seeing the pieces where they are standing. He is picturing a position 5, 6, 7 moves ahead from where we are right now.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing with this bishop b1 is that he has played it. No, I wanted to say it's not such a natural move, in fact.
He doesn't care, it's not natural.
Since he didn't spot it immediately. I'm by the way, not sure if bishop, in a retrospective, what Rajabov has got is a very good position. So I'm no longer sure if the suggestion to move the bishop to b1 at once was the better move than the actual bishop c2. But anyway, what I wanted to say, if you didn't spot bishop b1 before, then over here you might not play it as well. But he did. And bishop b1, I believe, is
yeah, that was the most popular
position.
move on YouTube and also quite popular on Twitch. So the big brain time for Rajabov led to the same conclusion as to you guys. And the Frenchman seems to be in deep, deep trouble. Not even a coffee or cup of tea will help here.
Yeah, well, move 18. And it's, that rare occasion where we don't have to, to talk much about how half an hour advantage on a clock will impact the time trouble or everything. First of all, no advantage for, Maxim has some 7 extra minutes. There might be there will be no time trouble. I mean, if it continues like that, it will be ended by move 25. Queen c2, second g6 win. It's like 3-4 moves left. So he desperately needs to do something, not to lose immediately. And I don't, so far, having difficulties to understand what this something is supposed to be. Because, yeah, preventing this battery bishop on b1, queen on c2 from killing you, from delivering a checkmate on h7, involves playing g7, g6, after which white goes bishop e3, and then it's bad.
He was about to make a move and then he hesitated.
Bishop to e8 could be the move to support this structure so that white doesn't win immediately after g6. He won't be able to sacrifice. But do you enjoy the position after bishop e8?
Certainly
I mean, that's terrible.
But it's about
That's
survival.
terrible,
At this point, it's about survival.
So nobody cares of enjoyment anymore, right? I mean, on Maxim Vachill-Graf's place. Yeah,
Just anything that can keep the game going.
And that's what since he reached for the bishop, I thought that was the move he was intending to play. Now, he's actually reaching for the other bishop in order to play bishop g5, I suppose. But it's like loses now.
Once again, let's see his move.
Let's see. I had a wrong position on my analysis diagram. But yeah. So bishop g5, I suspect that was the move he almost played. But what is he planning to do here? Well, yeah, makes sense. So it's g6, and he clears the path for this queen to e7. So that's the point. Then g6, and then after bishop e3, he can play queen e7, where he's holding. He's not lost immediately. The position is still terrible.
This may be what Maxime wants, and you guys say in the chat that if bishop e8, queen e4, and
queen e4,
think that's a very good explanation on why that move is not working.
I keep forgetting that there is much better square than c2 that white would love to put his queen on. So, but it's quite suspicious because I have a feeling that bishop g5 doesn't really solve all of black's problems either. Bishop g5 is played.
It could be the best defense here, but we are saying that it may be the best defense too. May not be enough in this position. There's only one defender, that bishop on g5. And white's attack seems to be menacing. What are the main moves here that Rajabov will consider, Evgeny?
Yeah, that was my try, to go queen c2 to play the same way. Yeah, the same way. But since the square on e7 is now available for the queen, maybe it's not as brilliant, because now we are not sacrificing on g6. Could it be, because at some point I was looking, a couple of moves before, I was looking at b2, b4 move, because queen on c5 is actually nicely placed. So could it be that here I'm playing b4? Point being that if the queen goes away, at the very least I'm taking the c4 pawn. So once again, combining, kind of not committing on one strategy only, combining the positional play, the, idea to grab the c4 pawn, with the threats on the king side. Because here after b4, queen e7, I can already take the pawn, and I suspect a2, a4 might be even stronger, kind of pushing the bishop away. But, yeah, and if b4, if black reacts with b takes c3, that's c takes b3 en passant, and a takes b3, then bishop a3, of course, is a very, very strong threat.
This may be interesting, and the move that the chat is suggesting is knight takes e6.
Oh, wow.
Big brain time on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you guys for the suggestion. Looking promising.
Knight takes e6, point being that if black takes, it's bishop to g5, right?
Yes, and it can't be taken because let's show the mate, queen h5.
That's how white checkmates in such situation. There is a f7 square available for the king, so queen h7 is not yet a checkmate. So first you give a check with the bishop, which forces king back. Then you have this discovered check with bishop from g6 controlling f7, and only then it's a checkmate on h7. So first get the bishop to the right square, and then proceed with the checkmate. That's okay, but there is this move, which I wasn't sure what white is supposed to do then.
Yeah, and it's also suggested in the chat, so you guys are
D5.
refuting your own moves in the chat.
Not necessarily refuting, because the game goes on. White has F4, protecting the
F4.
G2 pawn and, attacking the bishop, so white doesn't lose material, but, it becomes quite double-edged. Or not. Maybe white is winning. Maybe white is still winning.
Just look at those bishops on B1 and C1.
Yeah,
They are in the
diagonals.
back rank, but they are attacking the black king with such power.
Yeah, that's the good thing about the bishops. Remember our bishop-knight discussion. Bishop is always better than the knight, right? So, well, I'm not sure about always, but any of those bishops is clearly better than the knight on B8, which seemingly has hard time being played to D7. Never happens. All right, so once again, the pressure is on Timur, and knight E6, yes, does seem to be one of the possible options.
Let's just make a list of candidate moves here for Rajabov. Knight takes E6, B4 you suggested earlier.
B4, which is perhaps a better than B3. Well, it's, in an essence, the same idea, but kind of more energetic than B3. So B4, and what else was there? Still a queen move, perhaps? Even though queen H5 makes less sense. Well, another way to play this position. Queen C2, G6. And I wanted to do something. Let me say this. This. Yeah, I was thinking of trading the bishops, but yeah, perhaps that's if the knight is not getting to H5, F6, that's not such a great deal. So trading the bishop with knight H3 is something I don't really like.
Yeah. And even though bishop E3 is a developing move, it does seem that the queen on E7 is helping the defense.
Yeah.
So right now the queen on C5 is not doing anything about the king's side, but from E7, actually it's a pretty good defender. You need the queen in defense. It's not just an attacking piece.
Okay, another attempt, and I suspect not the correct attempt, but an interesting attempt to sacrifice a piece is to go knight H5. I'm not sure what I'm threatening, honestly. But let's pretend I'm threatening kind of the positional continuation of taking on G5, and it's not convincing.
So once again, deep focus time for Timur Rajabov.
Yeah, but
In Spain it's called siesta.
It's when you concentrate and think about things. Yeah, when you're fully,
We Spanish
fully
citizens
tense,
do it a lot.
fully tense for a few hours. Yeah, that's what you do. Okay. So, no, but really, the hard part for Timur Rajabov could be that there are too many options. A lot of tension, a lot of stress. He understands. He feels the chance. He understands that's the much more than comfortable, advantageous position might be a winning position, period. But too many options, and if there is no clear-cut solution, because sometimes even the engine would say plus 1.5, but there are various 1.5s. Sometimes it would be just a pawn up in the endgame, which you know how to win. Sometimes it would be huge positional advantage in some ragged position which you can misplay. And if there is no clear-cut solution, and he'll spend a lot of time choosing the move, it might be tricky.
Almost
this
touching
pawn on
the E6 pawn.
they barely survived. Barely survived.
Let's see if we get a repeat of that intention. Knight takes E6 on the board.
Oh yeah, really played. Okay.
And he stands up. That's what you do. You make a strong move and you stand up and you tell your opponent, here, suffer a bit more. It could be a winning move. We don't know the engine evaluation, but it seems to be a very promising position.
Yeah, right. Well, from Black's standpoint, I'm guessing I have to take on E6, allow White to take on G5. And then, well, try to convince white not to checkmate me. Knight d7. So in a way, if if the king survives within the next couple of minutes, I'm not asking for much, right? But if there is like no immediate punish, then I actually think that in practical game, black's chances are not that terrible. Well, pawn down, objectively, once again, it's must be a winning position. But still, there are factors where, like for instance, now the c4 pawn is no longer that weak, right? White is nowhere near surrounding and taking c4. Queen d5, knight c5, knight d3, that's the idea I want to achieve with black. Block the b1 bishop or force white to trade so that opposite colored bishops on the board. Once again, white's advantage might be huge there in this position, but you know, the factors that there are potentially opposite colors, the factor that the bishop on g5 might actually be somewhat passive in some positions. If you play bishop h4, g3, let's say, to make this bishop guard the king, it will be a very good king's defender, but at the same time, the bishop itself won't be that active. So those are the potential factors that can disbalance the position, right? And then after you win this pawn, you'd rather prefer queens to be traded. So unless, once again, unless you're winning immediately with some queen c2, rook f5, you know, g4 and win material, which I don't believe because of queen d5, then it might change the character of the game, and white will actually have to start to, you know, pay attention, play a bit more carefully, and then maybe Maxime will have his chance. But of course, objectively, this position after f takes e6, bishop g5 is horrible.
Looking very sad for the Frenchman, but he has to find the best practical chance. So even if his position is lost, as you said, there's a difference between whether it's minus 150 or minus 2 in a position where it's just very straightforward, or where you can mess things up, like some complexity, some chances for your opponent to make mistakes.
And balancing factors, right? I mean, so 2 extra pawns could be, we have 4 here on the king side, 4 pawns versus 4 pawns, plus I have 2 extra. That's simple. But if it's like I have 4 pawns running, you have 2 pawns running on the other wing, okay, maybe 2 pawns are faster because they 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and I have to push all 4 of mine.
True. So we're going to see what Maxime considers the best practical chance here for black. That is the main question. I see one of the suggestions in the chat would be after knight takes e6, f takes e6, bishop takes g5, queen d5, f4, and trade. Queen takes g2.
Do you provoke f4 really? I didn't realize that. Because that's a good chance then.
So we'll
f4.
go for a pawn down endgame.
So you trade over here. White has to take, right? Otherwise he's not winning. No, wait. He has this. But then he's not up a pawn. Yeah, so in order to win the pawn, I have to take on g2, take on g5. But this one, you know, is not without a chance. Because knights, horses, they're jumping.
They are, and now the bishop on b1 is not as cool as it used to be.
Yeah.
Let's see if Maxime goes for that.
Perhaps.
F takes e6.
Yeah, you're right. So perhaps Maxime will go for that.
That was a variation by Rohti. Thank you so much for your suggestion, and everyone else being really involved in the Twitch and YouTube chat. We appreciate your comments.
So f6 played. Not that Timur has that many alternatives. Gotta go for bishop g5. Any alternatives here? You know what? Interestingly enough, yeah, f4, let's agree that f4 has to be played. Yeah? Queen takes, bishop takes. I would really want to try this, even though it's not a pawn up. King g2, rook e7, because I still like the structure. I still like the fact that my bishop gets to g6. So that's actually a viable alternative to the other position we had. I'm not saying that this is a better version, because after all, material matters. But here, the fact that white starts first, he has a very good square for the bishop on g6, and the next move is rook a to d1. So it's being more comfortable in a way, having more coordinated pieces in comparison to having an extra pawn, but black starting the initiative first. Knight d7. I'm once again not 100% sure about knight d7, but I suspect it's knight d7, c5 over knight c6, and question mark where the knight is going. So yeah, so that'd be actually a tough position to navigate in the in a practical game. Could be still winning, and possibly Rajab was going to win, but it's not automatic. It's not, once again, it's not like one of those positions that we were discussing that you're just like, you make decent moves and you are winning in the end.
Yeah, so this position could well be winning for white by engine evaluation. We don't check the engine evaluation here, but as a game between two human beings, it could be a good practical choice to aim for that endgame instead of getting mated.
Yeah, as long as you have, I mean, the word endgame is already relieving. I mean, there will be endgame.
There will be one, possibly there will be one. What do you guys think? Will Maxim go for the endgame with the pawn down? Can he find a better practical chance here? Because all he needs is a practical chance, because his position seems to be really, really bad, but he has to keep the game going. This is the second classical game. A reminder, this is a knockout system. If he loses today, he's not going home, but he's out of the finals. He will play for the third place, and the third place matters here, because we have been informed that the third place here at the World Cup, the third place at the Grand Prix, and the second place at the Grand Swiss, those players will be taken into account for the wild card for the candidates tournament.
Yeah, and the story with Maxim, remember the previous candidates, because he missed all three qualification possibilities by a very, very small margin. It's like he was almost qualified by rating, but ended up... well, by the way, who has qualified by rating to the previous candidates? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. That's confusing.
Wait, I should
was
know
it
that.
Shah Mamediyarov? No, Shah qualified from the Grand Prix. Shah qualified from the Grand Prix.
Didn't Caruana qualify by rating?
Caruana to the candidates. Oh yeah,
Caruana
you're right.
and who's this?
No, there was one spot.
Oh no,
or
only
two
Caruana.
spots?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the other two spots
Whatever.
for World Cup and
Yeah, so
Grand
Maxim was
Caruana
possibly
qualified
Wesley
by
Saw.
rating.
Wesley Saw has qualified by rating. Caruana and Wesley Saw, two players. Whatever. So Maxim was very close by rating. Maxim lost this roller coaster semi-final against Aronian in the previous World Cup. Again, would he win it? He's in the final, he's qualified. And then in the Grand Prix, he was doing quite well, and well, but there was a different system, there was a set of Swiss events, so he needed a win in the last round to assure qualification, and he lost.
A missed chance by Maxim for the candidates 2 years ago, but this year he definitely wants to make an appearance, qualify this year for next year's candidates tournament and challenge Magnus if he can by winning the candidates. So far in this game, he's not really securing his place, because third, even if he will get the third place, well, it's only, we're talking about conditional tense. He hasn't lost this game yet, but if he loses, he will have to try to get the third place here.
Absolutely. So queen to d5 was played. It's on Rajabov to decide, well, if there is any viable alternative to f3, sorry, to f4, because, well, technically, the endgame, the line I was advocating, that possibly you want to have less extra material but more comfortable pieces. And then the other thing to consider, it could be that queen g4 serves the same purpose, because when, say, black captures over there, takes on g5. No, but this one I don't like. Yeah, I do get to win a tempo with bishop g6 or bishop e4, but those double pawns, they are not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, there will be some rook f4. So it's f4 almost for sure, and then a choice over here, either to take on g2 immediately, have an extra pawn, but black will start developing first, or go for bishop e7, bishop g6, and try for positional play.
Yes, according to our chat, king takes g2 is better. So
Yes,
obviously,
I
engines
can
always
imagine.
prefer
materialistic approach.
We will see which one Rajabov prefers, and we're gonna let him think about this because we will go for a short break, and then we'll be back with this really exciting game in the semifinals. There's a lot on the line, including the qualification to the candidates. So the winner in this game is sure to be at the candidates next year. See you very shortly. An interesting decision has been taken by Timur Rajabov in that critical moment where we left the game before our break. He was deciding whether to push f4 or play queen g4, and he opted for queen g4. Let's bring up the analysis board and see the difference.
Yeah, so, well, the chat was not happy with this, I believe. They said f4 had to be played. Chat is always right. So let's see what has happened. Indeed, queen d5, attacking this g2 pawn, was disturbing Rajabov quite a bit, right? He would prefer to keep the bishop alive, but you're getting checkmated. And f4, once again, was the line that we were looking at. And then it seems black has to force the queen straight. But now that I'm thinking, could it be that Rajabov didn't like to play the position without the queen straight? Like, we know the answer. I mean, that's the problem that's called result-oriented thinking. Yeah? But say if black does something like knight d7, and could it be that white was not sure that this position with extra pawn is actually advantageous? Because the bishop, well, the combo of having the pawn on f4, bishop on on g5, not hanging just yet, but at some point it might start to be hanging. Maybe it was something that disturbed Timur Rajabov. So he went for queen g4. Now our guess was takes on g2, right? Takes, and either king takes g2, or once again you can try this, bishop e7. But in both of those lines, white is no longer having an extra pawn.
Evgeny, a surprise from Maxim's side is that he doesn't really want to go for that endgame, even if he wouldn't be a pawn down.
So he doesn't want an endgame. He plays knight to d7. That's brave.
It's brave that he's not forcing the endgame when we were really, really worried about his king.
That's brave, and I want to say that's bad. I don't know.
Maybe both. We don't know yet. Let's analyze this move.
Yeah, I don't know what does he mean. Certainly he's not afraid of bishop f4 because he's taking it there, right? Bishop, however, is still not hanging for real. How about bishop e4 move? What's the plan there? Bishop e4 move is the tempo. I don't understand. Wait a sec. Queen e5, bishop c6, targeting the queen. Queen g5, white is just a piece up, right?
Yes.
So that's not an option. Knight e5, bishop d5, knight g4. Maybe that's the line.
Now both bishops are hanging.
Yeah.
according to our chat, as you said, the chat is always right. Knight d7 and queen takes g2 have a similar evaluation. For our human evaluation, though, we thought that Maxime would try to get into an endgame because this position around his king is looking really dangerous.
Well, the thing being, in fact, it's getting more complex now, right? Because after the knight being exchanged, after black somehow established the coordination, we couldn't spot the line where black actually is getting checkmated. So maybe, right, we were under the impression that at any given time he gets the chance to go for an endgame, he has to. But maybe he's right.
Yeah,
maybe he has his point. So knight d7 is a legit move then, because bishop e4 similarly runs into knight e5.
Yeah, a couple of you are supporting knight d7, or at least saying that it's not losing. Neil is saying, for instance, that knight d7 was the only other move that doesn't lose, apparently. Thank you guys for the comments, and keep them coming. We of course try to monitor both chats on Twitch and YouTube, so make sure to let us know about your thoughts on this game. Will Maxim Vachilegraf survive this game and play the tiebreaks tomorrow, or is it Timur Rajabov who is playing one of the best games of his life and will knock out the world number 6?
Yeah, speaking of playing one of the best games of his life, I got the confirmation that b4 was similarly very, very strong instead of knight e6, not really simplifying things. And it turns out, but b4 line was in fact not that easy to calculate, because this is not a complex line. Yeah, white is just a pawn up. However, if black takes en passant, and I was saying that, yeah, white can simply recapture back, but in this case, queen c3 and so on, so on. So you actually have to spot the intermediate move, queen d3, threatening once again a checkmate, and only after g6 you capture here, threatening bishop a3, and that would be a very big advantage for white. But knight d6, seemingly nothing wrong with it, and yeah, after knight d7, now Rajabov has to make a decision where he wants to go. Bishop e7 is still kind of a playable move.
Yeah, bishop e7 is a suggestion of Ghost, for instance, on Twitch. Thank you guys for the comments. To place the bishop on d6, that's absolutely valid.
So knight e5 perhaps doesn't really work because of queen g3, I suspect, and then the knight is hanging, the rook's hanging, and bishop e4 is there as an idea. Right, so bishop e7, he has to move the rook somewhere. Oh, wait, and where is he moving his rook? Oh, well, he moves the rook to attack the bishop, but perhaps that's the... or to f7, yeah? Because I was
queen g6
somewhat worried about queen g6, but then there is a check, right?
Yes.
This, and the bishop is still hanging. So rook f7 and bishop d6, and I don't know what. Still, queen g6 is scary, as you said. Still, no guarantee that black survives this position. But yeah, well, coming back, now that I'm thinking, it could be that the most precise play from Timur Rajabov would involve like improving on his moves 14, 15, something around this point. Like, so the ideas to improve would be, this bishop b1 at first place. Then, rook e1 seemed normal over here. There could have been at like h4 move we were looking at and other stuff. Yeah, well, perhaps the problem with h4 is that black would still go queen d5, yeah?
Yeah, similar idea. A reminder on the time control for those of you asking, they do get extra time after completing move 40. So at the moment, this is move 21. They still need to play 19 more moves before the additional half an hour. And there's a 30-second increment per move.
Yeah, right. So, well, not yet a time trouble for Timur Rajabov, but once again, if this will be a moment he realizes that I'll have to switch to the long game plan, right? So no more direct assault on the king. I have to kind of play positionally, try to play for two bishops advantage. Might be not that not that easy, right?
It's good news for Maxime because his position seemed really desperate at an early stage of this game.
Yeah, wait a sec. Bishop e7, I said rook f7, bishop d6, but that's a pawn down, let's not forget. So I suspect after bishop e7, there should be knight e5. I don't understand how it works, but it should work. I mean, otherwise, yeah, position pawn down, that wouldn't be, yeah, when there was a discussion if it's acceptable or not to play knight d7, yeah, it's not for this line, because that's terrible. I mean, that might be not, you're not resigning immediately, but that looks terrible. So I suspect, once again, knight d7, bishop e7, I suspect knight e5 is what you're doing there. There are moves like queen d2 as well. So knight e5, queen there, rook e8, for instance. What is that about? So luckily for black, white can't take on d5, or on e5 with the rook because of queen d1. Taking on e5 with the queen is not possible because of checkmate on g2, so despite the fact that the knight attacked with both white pieces, white cannot take on e5, similarly will have to move his bishop. And then, not clear where the bishop goes. Say bishop a3, black might consider knight d3 and try to play this kind of position. Opposite colors potentially, which is
some practical
again,
chance to get
some
an opposite color
practical
bishop
chance.
endgame.
Well, if once again, if we are talking this magical endgame,
if he gets the endgame.
Yeah.
Also, the bishop on a3 is not as active as it used to be, that dark square bishop of white. So
yeah, right.
With the queen bishop battery for black on the long diagonal, this is chance, and the d3 pass pawn if it stays alive.
Yeah, right. It's like having the bishop on e5. It arguably would be white's king, which is safer, because white still has the f-pawn, can play f3 and shut down the battery. But with bishop on a3, it is somewhat out of play in this line.
Yeah, but I wish that bishop was on e5 or d4.
Yeah, right. And Maxime, he sat down and then he stands again after this knight d7, leaving Rajabov spending his time.
It's a lot of tension in the air. Of course, there is. This is the second classical game. If there is a decisive result, it means that the loser of this game is not qualifying to the finals. So there's a lot on the line. Qualification to the finals means qualification to the candidates tournament, and that's what all these top players came to Siberia for. They want to qualify to the candidates. So apart from the prize fund, which is of course a really nice prize fund, and we will mention one more time that the winner here gets $110,000. There's an overall prize fund of $1.6 million. But apart from the prize fund, of course, for all top players, what matters is the qualification to the candidates tournament and a chance to challenge Magnus Carlsen in case they win the candidates.
Okay.
A couple of suggestions in the chat about this position. What move shall we play? We could have a look at some of those suggestions while we are waiting for Rajabov to make a move. So, of course, bishop e7 is a really valid option for him. And then, what else shall he consider? We're going to have a look at that with Evgeny. So, bishop e7 we already checked. What else do you think Rajabov is considering?
Wait a sec. Did we look at bishop e4? Because I was advised bishop e4... knight e5, and we stopped right there because I said bishop d5 doesn't work. Yeah, by the way, bishop e4 was played. I was advised that queen h3 is a strong move.
Queen h3, we didn't
Queen h3
look
is
at
the
that
strong move, after which the only move for black is, because white is threatening, remember how we said white no longer gets to the black king. In fact, by playing this combination of moves, white does threaten bishop h6. So the only move turns out to be knight f3 check.
Maxime is back, and I was going to give a shout out to those 4 beautiful chairs being empty. of course, with only 4 players remaining from 128 participants that started the competition here in Khanty-Mansiysk, this is getting a little, a small group of players who will stay here with us till the very end, because the losers of the semifinals will then play for the 3rd place. Another move. Let's just catch up with the current position then.
Yes, so knight e5 after bishop e4, indeed. Yeah, that's the position we're discussing. And then queen h3 apparently gives white a very good chance, because knight f3, that's what I was told, is the only move. White captures with the bishop, and black has nothing better but to take the bishop on g5, accepting this, which is the position pawn down in the heavy pieces endgame. Some chances of survival still, I believe, but very, very tough position. And now that I'm looking at it, it could be as well that you don't need to hurry up with taking on e6. There could be a better move like rook a to d1, maybe just to guard the, take control of the over a d file, because in such situations with black having that many weak pawns, I believe safety is the most important thing for whites, and not to allow any kind of counterplay, and you will inevitably win over one of those pawns later. So, right decision by Rajabov, I was told. The bishop e4 is a very, very good point. And
so this is once again getting into a different endgame. We shall see whether Rajabov will go for it. He's got 24 minutes left to decide whether bishop e4, queen h3. Is there anything else to consider?
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. Anything else like queen g3, but then black seemingly is free to move the queen. Not that his position is immediately great after that, but yeah, it's just that queen h3 is the better move. So
yes, okay. We are expecting queen h3 from Timur Rajabov.
I don't really think he has missed knight e5. Well, how about the fair endgame? Bishop to d5, knight g4, and say capture on e6. Because white's going to have 2 bishops. Black seemingly has to take on f2. No, well, that's how you blunder, because rook takes on f2. That's something to avoid. Rook takes on f2 and bishop g4, there is rook g2.
Rajabov is shaking his head slightly, that maybe that he missed something in his calculation, and that's when you may end up starting to see ghosts, variations or moves that don't actually matter that much, but you start to be scared. Psychology plays a big, big role in every single chess game, especially when the stakes are so high.
Well, another version, we could try to go to h5, trying to achieve the same position, because, yeah, if the queen moved, I suspect bishop takes on h6 almost wins. So if black is going after the same line, giving a check on f3, taking on g5, it might be even easier, because, you know, queens are traded, yet another pair of weak pawns. Then white captures here, a pawn up plus those terrible isolated black pawns, I believe. That actually will be not a lot of chances to survive for black. So Rajabov can take his time, because it's clearly the critical position in the game, and if, let's say, if he works out one of those lines and gets the pleasant endgame, I'm thinking he doesn't need that much time to navigate, you know, a pleasant heavy pieces endgame with an extra pawn.
Yeah, that could be a good practical choice, to go for a simpler endgame instead of wanting to give mate here. Let's see what Rajabov thinks, which option he will go for. An endgame, or trying to keep the queens on the board with queen h3. Queen g3 is another suggestion in the chat.
Queen to g3, which might be the same, in fact, if black goes for this.
True.
And yeah, and if black tries to move the, well, it's not that many squares to move the queen. As queen c5, bishop e3, once again, white has absolutely no reasons to be unhappy. two bishops, bishop to d4, maybe just wins, yeah. Feeling is wherever white moves the queen, knight f3 is what black has to do.
21 minutes left, and Timur Rajabov has the upper hand in this game against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, but he may be feeling like if he missed a chance, if this was not the most precise. And that also counts a lot during the game. If you start losing your confidence a little bit, if you think that there was something stronger than what you actually got.
Yeah, well, this combination of slight time trouble and your reflections about, perhaps I've spoiled it and I could have played better. That's usually a dangerous spot to be in. Once again, when I said dangerous, nothing's dangerous for white in terms of losing this game. Yeah, it's just like...
It's dangerous that he may not win it.
Yeah, I believe Rajabov can see that, basically anywhere you move the queen, you probably just end up trading the queens, winning the pawn, and just...
Queen to h5.
Queen to h5. Which
isn't that a little
should
bit
be
of
forcing,
a self-pinning? Yeah, but it's very forcing, though. Everything on the fifth rank.
So say queen on fifth rank, that perhaps is the only move you can play in order to prevent bishop h6, or you're not really preventing bishop h6, but you have knight f3. No, wait. You have queen f2, question mark? You have queen f2, king goes, but then it's lost.
Yes, because you don't trade queens anymore.
You don't trade queens anymore, and bishop e4, white similarly wins the queen.
I think, yes.
Check,
it does
and then
look like you're winning
on
the
f2.
queen.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with this line. So after queen c5, bishop h6, knight f3 is the way to survive, but white doesn't lose the queen himself because bishop f3 and guard h5. It's even better for white compared to previous line. No, I don't think black has anything better than knight f3 check here.
So let's show one more time the knight f3 line, if that's the best for black.
Knight f3. White captures with the bishop. Queen to g5. In this case, white has to trade the queens. I suspect has to take on c6 and takes the pawn. And how on earth black is planning to survive it? It's like going rook b8. Well, it could be some slight chance, because you don't want to part with your b2 pawn, and playing a move like rook e2 is something, once again, something not very comfortable. So if white would have the rook to play rook to e2 or d2, the other rook, while keeping the rook on e6 active, attacking the pawns, I would be much more sure that white is winning. And here after rook e2, that was my first thought. That, okay, anyway, we are playing rook e2, we are solid and pawn up. But then black starts like lifting the rooks to f5, b5 maybe. So this pawn is still quite a bit of a target. Queen to b5, which is... wait, queen to b5.
Well, we were considering knight f3
b5
as the most forcing and perhaps best defense for black. Maxim decides queen b5 is his preference. Is he right?
Is he right? Bishop to h6, bishop e4, or what's the point? Once again, bishop to h6. I'm saying bishop to h6. Takes that far I can calculate. That's mate in two. So no gh6. Bishop e8. Well, it's not the position you should be calculating. Bishop g7 should win. No. Well, I'm trying to understand what's the idea after bishop h6. Is he going for this endgame? I mean, this one, bishop f3, and then trade the queens. But that's terrible.
Why go for it now? Why
That's
not one move
terrible.
earlier?
That's terrible. So
I don't get
queen
why he would want
b5.
to allow bishop h6.
There should be some tactic he's relying on, but I don't see any.
We were talking about ghosts already, but maybe the case that it's Maxim who's seeing ghosts, and bishop takes h6. That is such a powerful move. I see both chats are happy about bishop takes h6,
Yeah, so
and
bishop
that looks like a
h6.
crushing move.
Yeah, that's a crashing move as well. It's very tempting move. That's seemingly played so easily when you see the... And yes,
Yeah.
no hesitation from Timur Rajabov. Bishop takes h6. That's move 24. And Maxime takes
Bishop
on
e4.
e4. Well, what's that?
And he thinks that he's not getting mated. Let's see if he's right. We are really doubtful about this.
Well, he's not getting checkmated immediately because he has eliminated one of the
Oh,
attackers,
that's true,
right?
but can he
But
survive this
my-
position?
Well, my idea was that you give a check on e5 with... check on f4
F4.
with white. Perhaps king goes to g... No, probably you... Again, I don't know. Because there are options, of course. Bishop h7... Then you take with the bishop, right? King g8, you take with the bishop still. Yeah, that's tricky. I don't quite... so queen went to b5 to take the pawn on b2 in one of those lines.
Will he have time to capture a pawn on b2 when the house is on
Yeah.
fire?
No, but I mean, in this line, for instance, bishop f4, bishop h7, takes there, and then he takes on b2, targeting f2.
That makes
Other
sense.
way
In that
around,
case,
yeah.
yes.
But this still has to be a terrible position. Like all those opposite colors, right?
Yeah.
Basically depends on white having the f-pawn and black not having the
True.
f-pawn. Says the most powerful attacks come on those long diagonals. And white, even if black somehow gets this bishop on d5, I don't know how that happens, white has an option of playing f2, f3, and just shutting down black's play. While
Indeed, we are
this
heading
bishop,
for this position. Bishop f4 check, king
bishop
g8.
f4, but king g8 was played
instead of bishop h7.
Instead of bishop h7, now white has a spare option of capturing on e4 with the rook, not having the opposite colored bishops on the board, because no longer knight f3 check wins the queen. White can recapture. Or the problem could be that bishop e5 runs into rook f5. So he will actually have to take with the queen. So unless rook e4 is the move, yeah, he will actually have to take with the queen. Where
And so he does.
black is forced.
Queen takes.
That's what he does, yeah. Black is forced to trade.
No. Bishop d5.
Really?
He doesn't want to. Maxime has been avoiding every single endgame possibility he had in this game, starting from the opening. Why is
Yeah.
he
No,
so
but
confident about this? For his chances of survival?
I have no idea, but honestly, I would snap take on e5, even though I understand the position is
Yeah.
probably bad.
But you start thinking that in an opposite colored bishop endgame, I have my chances with material down too. But with
Yeah.
queens on the board, the king is still vulnerable. And opposite colored bishops in the attack can mean an extra piece for the attacker because the opponent's bishop will never be able to defend on the same colors.
Yeah, and I don't see, I mean, it's clearly the downsides of this myth, which you've just described, but I don't see any benefits. It's not like you have any threats with your own queen, it's actually misplaced on b5. So white can, along with the other continuations, I mean, I don't see what's wrong with rook e2. Yeah, well, other decisions could have been, like, you know, questionable, this, that, but I don't like bishop d5. That's just bad. It's
Yeah.
got to be bad.
I also have the feeling that Maxime, for some strange reason, has been trying to avoid the trade of queens every single time he had a chance to get to an endgame. But now this is the main moment when we will be criticizing him for it, because as you said, the queen on b5 is misplaced, he's material down. The queen on e5 is beautiful, so even if you just compare the two queens, the one on e5 is a really powerful, perfectly placed piece that is a big threat to the black king. What is the b5 queen doing? Nothing.
Not much. Okay, it attacks the b2 pawn for now.
Which is a one-move threat.
Which is one-move threat.
And
if
it's
we
parried
guard
right now.
Yeah, and that's played, rook e2. Rook e2. So it's like black will have a few active moves, like starting from rook f5, possibly other rook to f8. So, but when he runs out of those active moves, I believe white is just winning.
It's a pawn up.
f3.
Healthy structure.
Yeah, well, the king is safe. That's the biggest difference, right? So the king's safe, and I'm not even sure if I have to. Well, it's kind of bishop g3 is a defensive move. I might as well want to go to e5. Then keep it there. Go perhaps play bishop d4. Bring the other rook. So white needs few more moves to reach completely safe and, well, simply winning position. So rook e2 played. 16 minutes left for Timur Rajabov for 13 more moves before the time control. And yeah, the feeling is like Maxim, well, he kind of pushes his luck, if I am allowed to say so, because once again, coming back in this game, those moments where bishop b1, later on I've got a confirmation it was a very strong move.
Instead of bishop c2, even more precise.
Yeah, well, there were another moments where white could have gone for a stronger move. And then we reached this position where he could have taken on g2 and gone for an endgame. He doesn't want it. One more time, the endgame, not so pleasant, but possible. Yeah, after what it was, knight f3, queen takes g5 in this position, and yet another endgame after queen e5, and instead he does what he does. Rook e2.
We shall see whether it will help him that he keeps the queens on the board, but so far it does look like a dubious decision that will cause trouble to the Frenchman, and it will question whether he can have a shot at the World Cup title, which is the qualification here to the finals.
Yep, so rook to f5 played. White might as well consider placing the queen on d6, interestingly, so, which is not really more aggressive, but kind of restricts black's possibilities a little bit. Yeah, because if we go under the assumption that Maxim doesn't want to trade queens, well, and therefore white will be looking for the queen's trade. Well, it's very logical. The opponent doesn't want something, so you try to convince him to go for it.
Yeah, true.
So queen on d6 might be just well, just a slightly more active square. The bishop will still go to g3. White's going to play f3. We'll bring the other rook. So we'll see. Rook f5. Timur's back to the board with 16 minutes. And similarly, very, very pleasant position. No, back to e3. Back to e3.
Yeah, those of you asking how's it winning for white, there is no direct winning line, but it's an extra pawn for white, and he has absolutely no problem. So a healthier pawn structure, safer king, active pieces, and an extra pawn, all in all add up to a decisive advantage, and it's going to take time for white to win it, but there's absolutely no risk in the position. He just has to keep improving his pieces and slowly but surely win the game.
Well, the thing with the opposite colored bishops, well, it mainly plausible to the endgames where opposite colored bishops and the kings only are on the board. But if the stronger side's king is safe, it might as well be the case in positions like this. F3, H3. And then I believe, like all of you guys played this solitaire Windows app, right? Where there is no, no counterplay. You have all the cards on the board. It's just your question. I mean, your task is to assemble it in a proper way. So this is more or less what white will be doing in this position.
Solitaire.
So he will defend the king, and then he will kind of work out what exactly will be the setup for my decisive attack. So I believe it will involve putting the bishop on e5 and possibly d4, bringing the rook once again, and then, in fact, this king on g8, which lacks pawn's shelter. So, like, for instance, we move the pawn from e6 to f6. It improves black's position a great deal. He might be still in a very bad shape, well, rook in this case, of course, ridiculous on f5, but I mean, just in terms of a pawn structure. So that would improve black's position a great deal. He's a pawn down, but that's the pawn on h7, which is missing. Now, with situation being as it is, I would dare to say that even if pawns will be equal, if there is one more pawn on h7 or h6, white is still better.
Yes.
And being up a pawn, of course, helps in such situations. Queen back to e8. So Maxime is trying to create threats to the white king. Queen e8, trying to bring the queen to h5, rook to f8. Concentrate all the forces against the king.
Makes perfect sense since the queen on b5 was misplaced.
Yeah, right.
And yet it is still a struggle for the Frenchman.
Oh.
Only good factor, the time pressure. There is a slight time pressure, but this position is not that complex. So Radjabov still needs to play 12 more moves to get the additional half an hour. And he's got 16 minutes left. That's a slight time pressure.
Yeah, right. But precisely as you've mentioned, it doesn't seem to be that many threats. Once again, I'm not sure. Yeah, as I said, bishop e5 is what I want. But to start with, I would probably play bishop g3, f3, h3. Those would be my first 2-3 moves in this position. And then that's the problem. As long as white doesn't blunder in one move, black hardly can think of any changes to the position. So f3, h3, and then white can keep hovering around, like playing sometimes silly moves like rook f2. For instance, let's make a few moves. So f3. I don't believe this sacrifice works. So let's suppose black brings more pieces. Rook f2, as ugly as this. Other rook to e1. Maybe trade a pair of rooks. Yeah. At some point, if black is not careful, I might take the pawn, go back. So it's very hard. I mean, every single spot around white king is defended.
True, it's difficult to see where can even white go wrong. It's very difficult to make a mistake in this kind of position, unless you make a mouse slip. In online chess, there could be a mouse slip.
Yeah, but not here. f2, f3, that's how Radjabov starts. Makes sense because, well, I kept saying that f3, f3 all the time, and I wasn't sure where the bishop belongs. Will it be g3? Will it be e5? Now that I'm thinking, there is another interesting setup limiting black's activity on the queen side, on the king side. If white is allowed, you can try to put the bishop on g5. Let's say black will play queen f7, which doesn't make that much sense. I would rather go for queen g6 or h5. But if black plays it here, you can put the bishop on g5 and support it with h4. That would be yet another possible setup. Queen to g6, yeah. Queen to g6, hinting at rook f3 if you put the bishop on e5, rook f3 or bishop f3, therefore bishop g3, I believe, and then yes, white's task perhaps is to get rid of one pair of rooks. Yeah, you keep the other one for your potential attack. So get rid of one pair of rooks. It'll be super tough, really.
It is. He would need to hallucinate and blunder something in order to give a chance for Maxime.
Well, you know what? Even those endgames, like hypothetically, queens are traded, pair of rooks is traded. So as long as there is a single pair of heavy pieces to support the opposite colored bishops, white is, well, maybe not guaranteed to win, but still has a very good shot at. Or even trade all four pairs of rooks. And let's remember the game between Vityugov and Karjakin. It was like round 3, I guess. Vityugov won a very nice game. Yeah, well, maybe Karjakin misplayed it. Maybe he blundered right before he resigned. But there was a pressure, well, precisely with those bishops. White had the dark square bishop, black had the light square bishop. And black's king was just slightly more exposed at white's king. Now, thanks to white's extra pawn, we have the situation where black king will always be weak, and white king more or less always will be safe. Like, we get rid of the rooks, white goes h3, king h2, puts the bishop on g3, and starts invading with the queen.
13 minutes left for Timur Radjabov. He still hasn't made a move.
Well. Decision time.
What else is he considering? What do you think?
Not sure. Well, rook f1 technically is possible, yeah, but again, as we agreed, bishop g3 he will end up playing this way or another. So I'm not sure why would he stop right here. He's probably trying to identify what black's possible counterplay is after bishop g3.
It's good to be cautious, even if you are material up and your position is better. That's something instructive, but he should also keep in mind his time management.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, yeah, that's like, you know, the most ridiculous example of that would be a very simple opening. Very simple opening example, e4, e5, d4, d6. I'm sorry, I'll show from move 1, just to ridicule this way of thinking. d4, d6, takes, queen d8, and black is thinking. Black is thinking because he says, his reasoning is, when I will take and my opponent will play bishop c4, there are two systems. I can go king e8, or I can play bishop e6. Both are playable, so I'm trying to decide for what move I'm going. But dude, you have one move, one legal move in the position, and there is no guarantee that white's going to play bishop c4.
Yeah, so be practical and go for the obvious.
That's pretty much the case with Rajabov. Well, technically, it's not like he has one legal move in the position, but bishop g3, you will end up playing this way or another. So just put it on g3 and think later on.
I agree with you. He should be more practical, because the only thing that favors Maxim here is that Maxim has been playing faster, and if he can put time pressure on Rajabov, he may not find the most precise moves, and the advantage may slip.
And yeah, and once again, it's not really clear what he's thinking about. Like, you would think to avoid threats on f3, you might want to move the king, but that perhaps precisely the way to get into trouble, because then rook f8, and when you move the bishop, black has boom, takes on f3, then once again rook takes on f3, and it's black who is winning because of a threat of double checkmate.
Yeah, the queen is hanging and mate on the board, so there is a chance, of course, to blunder here, but at this high level, we can't really think that Rajabov will fall for this.
No, of course, and as I'm saying, I mean, king h1 is like, I'm trying to artificially make up an idea for white that Rajabov could be thinking of. H4. So he does want his bishop on g5, so the other setup I was mentioning. The problem with that could be... Oh no, never mind. This, for some moment I've hallucinated, might have been an issue, but apart from rook e4, which actually allows e5, might be not that simple, but there is queen g3. And you avoid the ping. Yeah. And obviously not the silly g3, protect with the pawn, because you protect nothing, the pawn is pinned, and black would be able to take on f4. So Rajabov decides, I'll play h4, I put the bishop on g5. That's a brave decision. Honestly, not sure if I like it. Not sure if I like it, because rook f8, bishop g5. No, maybe it's fine. I was worried about some like double sacrifice and then queen getting via h5 to g4. A double, well, not a double sacrifice, but double capture with the rooks, right? So, interestingly enough, yeah, the bishop on d5 perhaps is more used in black's potential attack than one of the rooks. So if you sacrifice anything on f3, it'd rather be the rook, not the bishop.
Yeah, the question of Ghost about b5 and trying to create counterplay on the queen side. Unfortunately, the pieces of black are all focusing on the king side, so it would be very difficult for him to try to create attack on a flank where he doesn't have many pieces supporting that idea. It would create weaknesses more than attack, unfortunately, for Maxim.
And speaking of creating weaknesses, that's precisely what I wanted to say, that b5 is not the move to be played in this game at all, I'm afraid, because for potential endgame, if you look at this bishop on d5 and in combination with those pawns, right? So bishop is guarded by the e6 pawn, and it guards all three other pawns, plus a7, a6, and it would mean at least some stability. So let's say if white gets to play queen versus queen with opposite colored bishops, or rook versus rook with opposite colored bishops, that's the way how you make all this stuff on the queen side stable. If you play b5, that's either your b5 pawn hanging when white attacks with the queen. If you play b5, a6, your a6 pawn is vulnerable. So that would create sort of additional objects for white to attack, potentially, I mean, in distant future maybe. And even if you open, say, b5 and white says bishop, you go b4 and white, for some mysterious reason, doesn't really take place there. It's hard to say what do you achieve opening the b file, right? Because there are other files open at the position. You're still like, if it would be the only open file, so that you take it and white has no other ways of playing. But here, rook b8, white says not impressed. Well, in this particular position, takes on a7 or just goes queen d4 with the idea to go rook e5. So yes, by the fundamentals again, you're stuck on one wing and then you want to open the other. I agree, but well, that's, by the way, absolutely wrong position on the board. But here, that's actually a very thin balance for black. I mean, his position is not great, and now he has to, first place, he has to try to create some threats, maybe imitating threats just to confuse Rajabov, but at the same time keep in mind potential of surviving in various endgames. So, well, inevitably, white will try to simplify, and then, if you create too many weaknesses on the queen side, then there might be no way back.
Maxim still has 35 minutes. It's the position. Well, actually, correcting myself, he's got 31 minutes. Sometimes our clock is not updating immediately, so it's better to look at the actual clock on our camera view, because I'm not sure why it happens, but sometimes this digital board doesn't update the clock immediately. His clock is running, but it's not showing the right time.
That's weird. So when I'm switching to this game, it starts right now. It's 30. Well, it was 35, then 39, then back to 35.
Yeah,
so
it's got 31 minutes.
And it is updated the moment Maxim's going to make a move, and the move will reach the digital board. When it's made on the digital board, then for a short period of time we will have the correct display of the. So you see now that Rajabov's clock was not ticking. It's 10:19 on our digital board. It's 10:19 on his clock.
Yeah. What moves do you think Maxim is considering? What are the main candidate moves here?
Not that many, to be honest. a7, a6 to free the rook, or to start with rook f8, then play a6. I guess with h4 and putting the bishop on g5, even though I was criticizing Rajabov for not putting the bishop on g3, which is an obvious quote-unquote move. I guess bishop g5 is better serving the purpose of limitation black's prospects on the king side. A move like e5, again, I'd be looking at, well, trying to sharpen the game, but I don't see how it sharpens. Well, actually, if you take, that's rook f3. That's how it sharpens. So e5 is
Bishop
a possible
G5.
move. Bishop g5, yeah. But then what's bad about e5, the pawn itself is vulnerable, plus the bishop lacks stability on d5 again. So if you keep it on the long diagonal, c4 is target. If you keep it there, you're no longer on this active diagonal. So then we go by the method of elimination. We don't want to touch this, we don't want to touch b7. So basically, black's position is, black is stuck in terms of pawn pushes. That's what you want to do, of course, to contemplate, to create some mess, right? You want to push pawns, you want to open new files. But black seems to be stuck in this regard, and therefore, I don't know, no recipe for Maxim Michelograph. He has to shuffle the pieces here and there. I mean, try to create some threats. Like, This, go queen h5, threaten rook f3, resign after g4, something like that.
Could happen, but Maxime will try to find the best practical chance in this position where he is a pawn down and he should be lost, but it's not a direct line that wins here. It's going to take patience and plenty of moves by Timur Rajabov to convert this into a full point. But so far, the Azir Grandmaster is doing his best to knock out the world number 6 of the tournament.
Yeah. So indeed, those positions, those, I don't know, middle games or potentially end games, they are never won too quickly by the stronger side, right? Never won too quickly. They are usually won in a very convincing manner, like paralyzing your opponent, right?
Yeah.
That's what Rajabov is trying to do, bishop g5. After rook af8 happened. And as sad as it sounds, I believe black, yeah, that's what he does. I wanted to say black has to take care of his a7 pawn because his threats on the king side are seemingly non-existent anymore. So a6, now it's time to bring the other rook. Yes, rook to d1. And then he's going to start lifting his position, rook to d4. Well, actually, rook d4, rook g4. White might say, you know what, I'm interested in attacking on the king's side myself.
Yeah, as he started the game with the king's side attack, he may switch back to that idea.
Yeah.
I like those rook swings. They are very aesthetic.
You know, rook d1, because I kept saying that white inevitably will have to swap a pair of rooks. And I had in mind something with rook e1, putting the queen to d4 and rook to e5, which wouldn't have been bad, again. Well, slightly simplifying so the king is safer. But yeah, perhaps Rajabov's move is even better. Rook to d1, rook to d4, rook to g4. And the good thing, once again, as long as your king is safe, you can always go back.
True. Yeah.
You can try this idea, you get to g4, create some threats, doesn't work. Okay, I'm switching to the other plan.
I'm checking also the Twitter sphere on what you guys are saying about the World Cup. Norwegian reporter Tarjei Svensson tweeted not long ago, Rajabov, semi-retired and the king of draws, is close to knock out Vasyl Lagrave and qualify for the FIDE World Cup final and the candidates. Maybe not sensational, but definitely surprising if he makes it. I agree that it's surprising, but he's working really hard toward that qualification, and he's here determined to make it. He today once again went for a very smart opening choice, in our opinion. And that led to Maxime being worse only after 10 moves.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, calling it surprising would be if someone would say before the tournament, Rajabov's got to be, one step away from the finals or in the finals. I would say I would be one of the first to say, no, this is like very low probability. But now if you're looking at the way he's playing, then, well, he's convincing.
He is. Although all these players, of course, who are here in the semifinals, they had their ups and downs. There's no way to get to this stage of a knockout system tournament without having some luck. They all had their moments when it could have turned in the other way, but fortune favors the bold, and in this tournament, Rajabov had his moments of bravery. For instance, against Jeffrey Cheong, when he did not repeat moves, even though he didn't see what was going on in that complex position. Yeah,
it was interesting because I've, coming back again to Rajabov and Jeffrey Cheong, I've seen him analyzing till actually quite a late time here at Chess Academy in Khanty-Mansiysk after the game.
They were here until the building closed down.
And Jeffrey was certain that his position was better at some point, while Rajabov said, well, I don't know if you're better, I have my chances, but yeah, it's like he really wasn't sure about the evaluation, and yet he decided that he wants to try, and he was rewarded for that.
Question in the chat is, what's the purpose of Queen E8?
Now, what's the purpose of Queen E8? That describes a very constructive plan that I've just described for black, means hovering around. Well, he brings it to C6, once again, having a hope. Yeah, that's what happened, in fact. Brings it to C6, well, with some ideas, possibly somewhere hypothetically sacrificing on F3. The point being that not only queen's influence on the king side is shut down with this bishop on g5, plus inevitable arrival of this rook on g4 will make this queen look silly. Right?
Yeah.
So
I like
it will run, into some bishop h6. Say black says pass, rook g4, and now bishop h6 is already a threat. So queen, in a way, is under fire of white's pieces.
Yeah, the queen would have had to leave, and now he's maneuvering his queen toward another useful square, the c6 square, to put pressure on the long diagonal. But I also like Neil's explanation in the chat. Lorinda saying that he's putting all his pieces closer to the clock to try to flag Timur.
Yeah, that's the recipe.
In
Well,
Blitz,
I mean,
that
not
would
in
be
the
the
classical.
perfect recipe.
But yeah, when we are talking back this, mechanical clock era, there was. I mean, black. People would believe black has a serious advantage in the blitz because he has clock next to his right hand, and as long as you're not left-handed, you would prefer to play black.
I was going to tell you, for me, it was the other way around.
So you had
I am left-handed.
So you had kind of double benefits playing white. So first of all, you were playing
double
white,
handicap as black.
Yeah.
Indeed. Oh, those old times with the non-digital clocks at Blitz tournaments. And you never know if the flag is about to fall or not because you can barely see the flag.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it would be convincing because it's like when it's 1.5 minutes, 1 minute still, you can see by the angle this flag is hanging. But when it really comes to playing on seconds, and nowadays it's convenient, but at the same time a bit frustrating. Yeah,
It kills the magic of the flag.
I mean, you see your opponent has 30 seconds, you have 15, and if there is no increment, you're probably lost. Doesn't matter what the position is. But back then, it would be a mystery, and some people, they would be just like offering a draw or agreeing a draw in the position which is clearly advantageous just because you don't know what time do you have.
Yeah, and those moments too when someone would try to hit the clock as strong as possible in case it makes the flag fall. The good old days.
Okay, so queen c6, indeed, bringing the queen closer to the clock.
Yes.
But seriously, what he's planning to do after a move like rook g4, because as I've promised, they return sometimes to f4 and e5. Is he planning for some weird sacrifice on f3 in this case? Find it hard to believe. I don't really see what you could... I mean, it's like you could sacrifice on f3 twice, hope the queen leaves somewhere so you have rook f1. But of course there is queen e6 check, trade the queens, and regrettably for black, there is king h2 and rook g2, so no perpetual whatsoever.
Rook g4.
Rook g4 played, because it's a right move.
Mm-hmm.
Rook g4, and now white starts having threats of his own with bishop h6, or as I said, put it back to f4, go to e5. And if it's ever not enough, white might, I mean, okay, that's a bit of too much, but white, in fact, might take 4 more moves to double on g5.
And that would be a very scary attack.
That would be scary. Well, no, but in fact, what's going to happen, you do want, with rook on g4, not only attacking, but in a way guarding your own king, right? So, well, taking care of the g-file. Mm-hmm. You might want to return the bishop all the way back to e5, or possibly even d4. So it does work on the diagonal as well. Then you move the queen. Then you lift the rook to e5. No, I think Maxim's position is hopeless. It's like he'll make it to the time control. No doubt about this. White is not winning in such positions like in 2-3 moves.
Certainly. So this is move 34. That is 5.5, 6 moves. I'm so bad at numbers. Yeah. 6 more moves till the time control. And just a clarification on the actual system here. Yes, they get half an hour after 40 moves, but there's a 30-second increment from move 1 on. So every time they hit the clock, 30 seconds appear on their time. And those of you asking about the game between the 2 Chinese grandmasters, they will be back tomorrow to play a bit of rapid, or maybe a lot more rapid, and blitz as well in case it's a tie.
Yeah, right. Today's game was nothing to write home about. King to h7 played by Maxim Vyshilogrov. So now it's the time for Timur perhaps to play bishop f4, or alternatively, does he have queen d4? In this case, however, Black might just go all in and sacrifice something on f3, right?
That's the question in the chat, whether bishop f3 works and which moment is the best for that.
Previously, there was, I believe have shown this line that after bishop f3, white captures the bishop and then trades the queens on e6. So perhaps king h7 kind of hints at this possibility, so that he's planning to capture on f3 twice. But I still find it hard to believe that it's going to work. Even after such a provocative move as queen d4 is, leaving one of the, kind of moving away one of the protectors of this f3. But still, bishop f3, pawn takes, and what to do? I mean, rook f3 is never an idea because of queen e4 check, trade the queens, win the game. And queen takes f3, well, a bit trickier, but yeah, okay, queen f1 that's red, right? But if I move it here, I don't really see what bad can happen.
Radjabov is down to 7 minutes.
Well, less in fact, once again.
Probably even less.
Clock lagging causes confusion. At some point I've seen from a camera view it was showing 6 something, so it must be 5:20, yeah. 5:20, and it is bishop f4, the move he plays, yes, shutting down those rooks on the f-file, planning for bishop e5.
Attacking one more time the black king that has been struggling in this game from as early as move 10, 11, basically, out of the opening.
Yeah, and few more moves, and Maxim Vyshilogrov might regret his decision not to trade the queens.
Yeah. He had a couple of opportunities for trading queens, and yes, he would have been worse. Yes, he would have had to try to survive a pawn down endgame, but we were considering that the best practical chance. Now with queens on the board and a weaker king, you really don't want the queens on the board.
He's the one who will regret the decision. Yeah, so that was the last moment he could have tried to trade the queen. I mean, he could have traded the queens and tried to save the endgame. After bishop d5, I'm just curious. Okay, that's one threat. Rook f5 threatens to take the queen. Yes, that's first threat he created. Then after f3, queen g6, not really a threat. Rook f8, second threat, wants to take the bishop. Bishop g5, a6, and here we go. So 2 threats, and then he had to leave the king side, and then white is the side who is attacking there. So for 2 threats, he declined. Of course, it was very precisely played by Timur Radjabov, finding this rook d1, d4, g4 maneuver, yeah? Because f2, f3, I mean, which might be a bit a surprising move for less experienced viewers, but that's a standard way of dealing with opponent's attack, especially in the opposite-colored bishop's positions. Yes, so you never want to go g3, weakening all of your light squares, even though in this video, even this doesn't seem to be that terrible. But yeah, but you never want to go g3. What you want to do is f3, and then depending on the situation, sometimes bishop g3, or as Radjabov has shown us, even a better idea of putting the bishop on g5 and supporting with h4.
But f3 is very instructive. You want to restrict your opponent's bishop instead of giving him a free hand over the long diagonal.
Basically, this battery is just invalidated by white having pawn on g2 and f3.
Maxim still has way more time than Radjabov, but this is currently move 35. 5 more moves to be played, and the players will receive an additional half an hour. Some practical chances, of course, there always are, but objectively speaking, Maxim's position is lost. And
honestly, that's not, I wouldn't even call for practical chance. It's like,
well, I mean, practical chances, you can hallucinate and blunder. That's what I call practical chance.
Yeah, but that's
human
like,
fatigue.
You know, practical chance. Well, yeah, I agree with you that it's still possible not to win.
Yeah.
But it's like 2 kind of practical chances. in some cases you're much worse or dead lost, but you create threats,
True.
and your opponent has to react to them. If he doesn't
Yes.
react properly, you all of a sudden you're back in business. And here your only hope is just like, you can't even attack something.
Yeah,
I
that's
wanted
the
to say
problem.
you attack the queen, your opponent doesn't move the queen, but you can't attack the queen. I mean, he has to say play queen e5 for you to be able to take something. Yeah. Speaking of what White's going to do next, I was saying of bishop e5, but there is as well an idea, say black does nothing, queen d4, attack here, play rook e5, once again, get rid of one of the opponent's pieces, and as well your rook from e2 is kind of not taking part in the attack, so you might want to swap it with one of the opponent's rooks. And over there, you're attacking g7 3 times. After, say, queen d7, queen b7, White is free to do whatever he likes. And I believe it won't be a long game after h5 and then potentially h6, just like you prepared for a couple of moves ago, h6.
Yeah, it's an extra pawn and better pieces for White, plus a safer king. So everything that you could ask for is in White's favor, except for the time. But here, this position is not that complex to be worried about the time that much. 5 minutes, 43 seconds, and this is move 35.
Yeah, and he's so comfortable. Once again, I'm trying to show the quickest plan or one of the, let's say, plans to improve the position. If he doesn't feel like it, that's okay. King h2 to g1 to h2 to g1, and you have an extra half an hour
True,
on your
because
clock. It's not like you can do something bad here.
Black has no active counterplay, as you pointed out earlier, and that is a huge problem.
Yeah, and can imagine how unhappy Maxime has to be. Rook f8 to f7, yes, preventively guarding the g7 square. So that might mean that in case I'm playing queen d4, Black actually will sacrifice. So that's yet another thing I'll try to make work. Bishop f3 takes and queen takes. Both white rooks hanging as well as the f4 bishop. But even in such situation, it seems like it doesn't work. Rook goes to g2 and g7 is targeted.
Yeah, and Black doesn't even have a check.
Well, it's a very strange coincidence. If your position is bad from positional standpoint, then it's very unlikely that tactics is going to work for you.
b5 is on the board. That's the move we were trying to tell you guys. It wasn't really helping Black's case, but nothing is helping Black's case.
Bishop b5, and then... well, how do you do it? How do you do it in the most precise manner? Yeah, I was looking at queen d4, which could have been an improvement. Still, there is no direct access to Black's position before you get to trade or bring in the attack the other rook, because so far, White has no worries whatsoever, but the success of their attack on the king side is pretty limited because Black has a couple of rooks protecting the king. So if we get rid of f5 rook and e2 rook, for instance, then of course White is winning. Another thing to mention, right? So in these positions, when it comes to opposite-colored bishops, that's what they say. I mean, in the books, opposite-colored bishops means extra piece in the attack.
And that's what's happening on the dark squares.
That's precisely what's happening on the dark squares, and Black has, once again, no pawn on f6 to cover the dark squares, while White has this fence against the...
Yeah, the fence on the long diagonal, so the queen-bishop battery of Black is not doing much, unless you want to sacrifice it on f3, but we already looked at those positions.
We looked at it at any given moment, and similarly nothing can be done. And queen f2, I've just highlighted with arrows, and Rajabov immediately has played it. So that's the last moment to try to complicate matters by capturing on f3, but I don't see it working. And the very next move, queen g3 will be played, targeting g7 yet one more time, after which black will have to step with his queen to 7th rank, and then being tied down with the defense. I don't see it happening for black. Black should be just dead lost. Very well played game, in fact, by Timur Rajabov. The moment that he reached this technical position, he shows his class.
Is indeed, and he had this game from the very beginning. So once again, a smart opening choice by Rajabov. He made Maxime get into an unpleasant position from as early as move 10. And we will keep going back to that moment where, first of all, he chose queen c7 over queen takes d1 in the opening. We can show it until he's thinking, I believe, because you guys kept asking, where did Maxime go wrong? Couple of moments where he could have changed the game, one being this queen takes d1.
I feel so sorry talking about move 6 and one of the best players in the world making a, perhaps not a mistake, but that's already a decision to be criticized for.
Yes, and that was what you were highlighting, that it's the mentality as well. It feels like Maxime didn't expect Rajabov to come to this game in fighting spirit. He may have thought that all Rajabov wanted was a solid game, because there's a lot on the line to just play it out in one classical game. He could have just aimed for the tie breaks and see tomorrow what happens. Instead, Rajabov had this opening idea. He was ready for the endgame. It's not a drawish endgame. So both Rajabov and Bashir have experience in that endgame.
That'd be playable, Well, so as I've mentioned, Rajabov has won this endgame after queen d1, king d1 with white. Well, Bashir won with black against Magnus Carlsen. Okay, there was a roller coaster game and it had nothing to do with the immediate outcome of the opening, but still. So both had experience in this.
So that's a very playable line. Instead, if you go for queen c7, which he did twice, then normally we would think that you have something up your sleeve. You have this very well prepared.
Precisely. So I don't know myself how this position has to be played for black if you go for queen c7. But you better know, because you are playing against Rajabov in the semi-final of the World Cup.
Yeah, so that's what makes queen c7 a strange decision, that he chose it and then it seems he wasn't really well prepared in this position.
Look, you play queen c7, you play e6, you play bishop e7, quasi-development. After queen e2, you already start spending time. That's move 9. Move 6 was your preparation. Move 9, you start spending time. Move 11, you start spending a lot of time because you understand you are in a very bad position.
Yeah, from here on.
Certainly something is wrong with the opening concept.
Yes.
And coming back to this motivation issues, expecting or not expecting Rajabov to play for a win, I have to say that Timur recently did a lot to, for those guys to think in such a way. He had tournaments where he was trying to be solid. And I suspect that mistakenly Maxime Bashir could have written off Rajabov's intentions to play a serious game.
Quite possibly.
And now he's getting punished for that. So queen to d7 was played. Still, okay. So, well, queen g3, Rajabov says, I don't believe in any kind of sacrifices on f3. And perhaps he's right. But
this is move 38, so 2 more moves by Rajabov and he gets half an hour.
Yeah, for Maxime, I mean, I'm not ready to claim it. I don't know what's better, but the feeling is like you take on f3 here. No.
He doesn't. He goes rook h5.
He doesn't. He goes rook h5. But how do you survive that? Bishop d4, and eventually white is able to do what I was claiming he needs to do. Bishop d4 and rook e5. So get rid of one more pair of rooks. Then I'll say black does nothing, rook e5 takes. That's even a better version, because now you take with the queen. Black is completely paralyzed. This is simply not a piece. You can't really do much with it. White wins maybe white wins faster, but I can see white wins with h5 and h6, where it won't be possible to take with the king, and it won't be possible to take with the pawn.
Yes, that seems to be a very simple and straightforward plan. And as you pointed out, the d5 bishop hits in the center, but it's not doing anything, so it's restricted by its own pawn chain plus the white pawn chain. It's a gigantic pawn on d5.
Yeah, right. And just pay attention, guys. I mean, when you reach a situation like that, when your opponent's opposite colored bishop is limited, right? I mean, if black would have the dark square bishop instead, so bishop of the same color, it's hard to imagine a square on the board where it will be misplayed to such a degree as this bishop on d5.
True.
Seemingly active bishop on d5, which was doing, which was creating some threats against the king. So any kind of dark square bishop, it would defend g7, or it would be possible to try to trade the bishops. So it wouldn't be that bad. With opposite colored bishops, white's king is so safe that you can, go to e3, go back to g1, and black simply can't change anything, absolutely.
Very true. And I agree with Lorinda one more time that those decisions when Maxime chose to keep the queens on the board, that may haunt now Maxime, because he could be well wishing that the queen from d7 and the queen on d5 were gone, but he didn't trade them earlier.
Well, even in a position like that, now that I'm thinking, queen c7, I mean, white won't trade the queens. White would, bishop d4, by the way, was played. White won't trade the queens. White will give a check, go queen g6. But even if the queens are traded, that still doesn't help black much. So bishop d4, and what was played? I believe Maxime goes for queen c7, But that's the moment where Rajabov says, wait a minute. You were offered this queen exchange for the few times.
You didn't want it.
And now, no queen's exchange for you.
Yeah.
No queen's exchange for you this time.
Trading a pair of rooks.
Wait seconds for Rajabov, but that's move 40. Well, please, can we avoid the drama of flagging on move 40?
6, 5, 4...
Rook e5.
Whoa, with
Rook
3
e5.
seconds.
With 3 seconds. Well, in a way, I can say it was a bit of showing off. Because no way he was planning, any kind of like losing on timer. He was perfectly in control.
He almost caused heart attack to us here in the commentary booth.
Perfectly in control. So rook f5. Rook f5, that's fine. But how does it help against the already mentioned plan of moving the pawn
H5,
forward?
H6.
H5. Well, maybe not h6.
Yeah, not immediately,
here.
but
even
prepared.
though, what's the problem with h6 immediately? Because, again, first of all, does black move at all? What does he do? Move the queen. There is h6. If king takes, not so hard. Mate in 2. Queen here, rook here. Yeah, king takes, doesn't work. Pawn takes. You go there, and checkmate from h8. Nothing, absolutely nothing for white. And now it's transparent that white starts having threats. But in fact, that's the moment where I believe Maxime understood himself that the game is gone.
Pretty much over.
When you don't have threats in such positions with opposite colors, you got to know that your opponent will. Your king is weak. Once again, can't stress it enough. With pawn on f6, just by the structure, it would be completely different situation. The white would actually have to work a lot in order to convert it. This pawn structure being as it is, it's just automatically, they will be this way. If you prevent this, the white will find the other way, but he will get to your king. And now that's what's happening.
Yeah, very sad story for the Frenchman, who obviously would like to qualify for the candidates tournament. Still, there are chances. So once again, this game is not over, but in case Rajabov wins, he qualifies to the finals and to the candidates, because the top 2 players from here will make it to the candidates, and the 3rd place matters here at the World Cup and also at the Grand Prix, and 2nd place at the Grand Swiss in Isle of Man next month. So those players who finish at those spots I mentioned will be taken into account for the wild card for the candidates. That's a chance for Maxime. He's doing well in the Grand Prix, and he could still play for 3rd place here if he loses today.
Rook g5, yeah, well, of course we casters have to keep the intrigue and say this game is not over, but I'm
It's
sorry.
not over,
I'm sorry, this game is over.
but-
This game is over. I mean, it's still in progress, but it is over. So Rook g5 intending to play Rook h5, yet another addition to, to Repetro. So you kind of have to take it, because Rook h5 is happening. And if you take it, pawn takes is yet another option.
Threatening g6 fork
Threatening
and the h5.
g6, yes. If there's something, let's find a way how to make it fancy. That's what I wanted to do. And maybe you don't need to. Maybe you don't need to. Yeah, just go there. Go there. And that's winning.
Yes, rook takes d5, rook takes e6. Almost any move with the rook, but rook takes d5 picks up a bishop and mate.
Sorry to interrupt, but a little correction to information that you've given us. Vashierograph will not take part in the Grand Swiss. He declined participation because
I didn't know.
he's involved in both Grand Prix Series and Grand Chess Tour Series.
Okay.
So doing well in Grand Prix, he decided to concentrate mainly on the qualification possibility from the Grand Prix and from the World Cup, which he almost succeeded, but,
Yeah, well, that makes sense taking into account that the chess calendar for top players nowadays is extremely busy, so they do need to decide which tournaments they have as priority. Ding Liren himself, who has been doing very well rating-wise, so he has been the /1 candidate for the rating spot at the candidates, but he had to participate at least in one of the Grand Prix / World Cup / Grand Swiss tournaments, one of the 3 events, and he chose the World Cup, but once he's here, he also wants to win it. So tomorrow, the 2 Chinese Grandmasters will be back. And just because Ding Liren may qualify by rating, well, it's highly likely that he would be the one. If he qualifies here, then the rating spot will go to someone else, and that someone else could be Anish Giri.
Oh, well, probably will be Anish Giri. Well, as it stands right now, I'm not sure about the average of 12 months, but it seems that Anish been pretty high this year on the rating list. While, say, they were shifting places, like place 4, 5, 6, it would be sometimes Nepomniachtchi, sometimes Wesley So and so on. But the thing is, like, other people would go up and then down, and Anish was always around, which of course positively impacts your average. Well, move 41 was played, King G8. Well, thanks for Maxime not trying to drag this game for a very long time, because obviously the position is bad. Black has really no constructive idea, no constructive moves. So he has to simply make moves, hope White messes it up.
But how can he mess it up is already a big question. You need to make a big blunder here to mess it up.
It's really, really tough. Okay, just to, for instance, yet another remark. So this position, you allow Black to swap all the rooks, and it's still completely winning. Even like that.
Because the white bishop is way more active.
Yeah, and it's not like White is winning immediately with h6, because Black kind of still has a check. But it's hopeless. It's hopeless. And now that the b7, b5 was played, that's even more to that, because if you somehow survive the king side, you have a target on a6. So say you bring the queen somehow around here, trying to defend the king side. White as well might get to this a6 pawn. Even sometimes, interestingly enough, in the endgame with king on b6. So imagine full success by Black, trading all the major stuff and still not surviving. So just to illustrate how bad Black's position is. And White, of course, shouldn't take on f5.
Yeah.
White should play h5 sooner or later and just finish the game.
You can trade one pair of rooks, but the other one is very useful in the attack, so we are unlikely to see an endgame.
Yeah, I'd say go queen g4. Put additional pressure on f5. If he takes, take with the bishop, then push the h-pawn. That should be
h5.
h5 at once, yes, nothing wrong with that one. h5, h6. You know what, we might see a resignation very soon, I believe.
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid so, because it's just difficult to see what could go wrong.
And interesting, well, once again, material-wise, it's one pawn for white, one extra pawn. I believe somewhere around this point, the computer evaluation should be +4, +5, something.
Yeah. Could be. We are not checking the engine, but at this point, it's way more than an extra pawn. It's all the factors we mentioned, but here white has very active pieces, better king, better structure, extra pawn, attack against the black king, immediate threats against the black king. He may just win a second pawn as a minimum because of h6.
So rook takes g5, well, and perhaps with even taking into account everything I said, that even if you trade the queens, it's much better. Yeah, but you keep the queens on the board. So queen g5, still threatening h6. But it will take some time. Therefore, I perhaps prefer my queen g4. Yeah, there is rook f4. You might still have to return. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So queen g5. And as we said, it's like it's never too fast, white winning this position. Actually, what Rajabov is doing is one of the faster way. Like, immediately going for this attack, perhaps not trying to set his piece in the most convenient way possible. Well, he actually did set it in the most convenient way possible. So queen to e7. Queen e7 is a little test, in fact, because white can play h6, allowing the queen straight, and I believe will be absolutely winning, but queen straight. So just a question. I don't see black having... well, maybe king h7 is what he does in this case. Yeah, I don't see how it's possible to survive here.
It's just so hopeless that we can barely find a way to make mistakes here.
Because this, it's just so bad. Pawn takes and rook h5, or once again coming back to almost my explanation that even rook g7, I believe, and takes with the pawn should be winning again, because king comes from the other side. But that's not what you do. You don't trade the queens here. You don't trade the queens. Queen g4, rook g5, h6. That's it.
Seems very simple. Simple and straightforward. There is no hope for the Frenchman unless a miracle happens.
Yeah. Well, and even though we claim that it's how simple it is, but of course it's understandable that Rajabov spends his time. He's got 25 minutes. Well,
it's a very high-stake
winning
game.
position, but in a very, very high-stake game. So you don't really want to mess up in such situations.
Yeah, and these are the moments when, even though he knows the right move, or that in this case there are plenty of good moves, he will double or triple check it in his calculation to make sure that he plays the best move. Queen g4 is on the board.
Queen to g4, yeah. Queen to g4, rook prepares to go to g5. And at some moment I was actually thinking that rook f5, give back the second pawn, but at least get rid of one of the attacking pieces, but doesn't really help. And that's what he did.
Played.
Queen f5, yeah, but queen f5 will be the last game of this match.
The last move, yeah.
Well, the last move of this game and this match. Yeah. Queen takes f5.
Wow, let's see. Final moment, and the rook is being
Queen
captured.
g4 takes f5, and
Handshake.
Teimur Rajabov is in the final.
Wow, the Azeri Grandmaster made it to the finals of the 2019 FIDE World Cup. That means that Maxim Vachier-Lagrave will stay with us here in Khanty-Mansiysk as a punishment, but not just as a punishment. He will have a match for the third place, which matters for the candidates, for the wild card. But of course, this is a huge disappointment for the Frenchman that he lost today.
Yeah, right. And honestly, even though, it's an extra motivation in a way for those who are playing for the third place, because they still can try to reach the candidates by being given a wild card after winning the match for the third place. But can you imagine playing after such a match?
Yeah, it's just...
He'll have 2 free days. Both of them will have 2 free days to reconsider, so to speak. So there is no tiebreak in this match, and there is a free day on 29th of September after the semi-final tiebreaks is over.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be 2 free days for both of those players. But, it depends. For Rachab, it will be really enjoyable 2 free days, because he's in the final, he is in the candidates tournament, and he will spend his time preparing for the final. So, so he has a shot of winning the World Cup, winning extra $30,000. That's a difference between place 1 and place 2, and has nothing to lose anymore. He's in the final, he's in the candidates.
Indeed.
He has nothing to lose.
And as for Maxime...
that's a disaster. So that those are 2 days. So first of all, he has to do everything at once. Stay alive after such a game, prepare for the match for the third place,
against
and try to rest.
And
try to rest. That's very, very tough.
So 2 sides of the same coin. Of course, a very happy Rajabov, who is in the finals and also in the 2020 candidates tournament. He's one of the participants that we can confirm, apart from Fabiano Caruana. He will be there fighting for that one spot, the top spot at the candidates, to challenge Magnus Carlsen. He's back, Timur Rajabov, starting as a chess prodigy and having good chances back in his times until the tournament in London, the candidates in London, that we think was one of the breaking points in his chess career. But now their other grandmaster is back, and he may win the World Cup here in Khanty-Mansiysk.
And he is back to the candidates, and he will try to turn those candidates into another breaking point in a way that
it's a positive one.
Another rise for him. Yeah, that's promises to be a very, very interesting candidates tournament, this one.
Indeed, and we are hoping that the finalist of the 2019 FIDE World Cup, Timur Rajabov, may join us here in the studio. So we're going to see if after their post-mortem with Maxime, Timur will be kind to join us and show the game to our viewers. So stay tuned, he may be joining us in the studio.
Yeah, right. Well, the minimum he'll do is an interview, pre-interview. Yeah, but we still hope to get him in the studio. Yes, and that will be. So the round is over, which is once again not. I'm not used to this. I'm used for those games to go all the way to 9 o'clock, which is 6 hours.
Are you complaining, Evgeny? This is too short.
No, I'm actually, that's relieving. But yeah, what I wanted to say, tomorrow we'll be back for more chess. It's not like we are saying goodbye just yet, but to remind you that tomorrow we'll have a tiebreak between Yu Yangyi and Ding Liren. I believe Yu Yangyi having the white pieces in game 1. If I didn't confuse anything, there was a drawing of lots.
And Ding Liren got the black pieces.
He got the black pieces, so that's same color as today.
Yeah. All right, we are going to see whether after their post-mortem Rajabov joins us. In the meantime, a quick summary. There was a short draw today between the 2 Chinese grandmasters, and they will be back tomorrow. The game between Ding Liren and Yu Yangyi wasn't very eventful. It was basically the same opening line that Yu Yangyi had with the white pieces against Nikita Vityugov. And Ding Liren improved on it with rook d5 instead of bishop to d5. If we bring back our analysis board, then we can show it to you.
On move 18, so they've repeated the classical game, or Yu Yangyi and Yu Yangyi's classical game against Nikita Vityugov, where it turns out, we didn't analyze this game much, I remember, so we were looking at the position, kind of missed this moment, but it was apparently a key moment on move 18, where Nikita went for bishop d5 and might have had troubles later on, it turns out.
Bishop d5 was an inaccurate move.
Bishop d5 was an inaccurate move. And Ding has shown what is an accurate move in this position. You go for rook d5, and not much has happened ever since. So they've traded the rooks. Oh no, wait, that's wrong. yep, over here, king g7, traded the rooks, got to this endgame, queen's endgame, just to discover that black has the perpetual check all over the board.
And that led to a draw quite quickly, but at this stage we already had the game between Radjabov and Vasil Lagrave on fire from as early as move 10.
That was a very exciting game indeed, and once again, many times we can try to improve on black's play, but certainly the whole concept was really...
Yes, we'll need to see what Maxime says, but we are waiting for Timur Radjabov to either join us here in the studio or to give an interview, so don't go anywhere. We're going to have the other Grandmaster with us in one way or the other, but look at those two. They're still considering what could have gone different in the game.
Take the pieces away from them, because they'll keep analyzing until morning. They have 2-3 days before the, before the next match.
Yeah, and the tweet by Norwegian reporter Tyre Svensson, Radjabov knocks out Vasil Lagrave and has made it to the FIDE World Cup final and qualified for the 2020 candidates tournament. These are the informations we have already announced, but he adds to it that he also breaks into the world top 10 for the first time since 2013. So congratulations to Radjabov. That is quite an achievement, all in one game. Qualification to the finals, to the candidates, and breaking into the top 10 again.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to see what those two are analyzing. Alternatives, alternatives after bishop takes h6, and yet another position with opposite colored bishops, and I feel like they're agreeing on this being bad for black as well. Yes, and now Maxime, you should have taken on e5, and then I believe he says himself something about it.
And even though that's a suffering in the endgame, but that was perhaps his best practical chance. We are really puzzled by why he was insisting on keeping the queens on the board that much.
Another moment where, according to Radjabov, he could have improved. Maxime could have improved on his play. Some e5 move, just to see where it was. I'm curious to see.
We could try to show it if we bring back our analysis board.
Not
or you think
really.
It won't make sense to try to?
Not really. I don't know. I'm not even sure that's a real position they have.
Yeah, most of the positions are in their heads and they just discuss it blindfold.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we would have to have the sound from the the playing hall to make it.
Indeed, and those of you who have been wondering about how the ratings stand and who qualified or who is close to qualifying to the candidates tournament, if you follow the hashtag FIDE World Cup, Martin Benedict has just tweeted about the updated document. He keeps an eye on the rating and who is close to qualifying or has qualified already. So do check out his tweet and click on that Google Doc, because he has been collecting all the information you need to know whether who is there or who is about to qualify.
So who are there?
Runner-up of the 2018 World Championship, Fabiano Caruana. This one we have known. And
the finalist of the World Cup of the current tournament that we are covering there, Timur Radjabov.
But he also keeps an eye, of course, on the other events. So far from the Grand Prix, it would be Mamedov and Grishuk. Of course, the Grand Prix series are not over, but at the moment, it would be Mamedov and Grishuk who qualify from there.
No, two spots, you're right.
And by rating at the moment, Dingliren, but if he qualifies here, then the rating spot will go to Anish Giri, most likely.
You know what? Talking of Grand Prix, I know we are to encounter on different tournament and so on, but while we are waiting for Timur, I can tell you something, that even though Mamedov is one of the top 2 players in the Grand Prix right now, I don't see how he can qualify unless he wins the next event, because he won one of them, but he got eliminated in the first round of the other. So he has one tournament left. Compared, for instance, with Maxime Vasil-Graf, who played so far one leg, and he was in the final with Shahryar Mamedov, plus they have bonus points for the matches you won under classical time control, so no tiebreak was played. So Maxime, and same situation with Jan Nepomniachtchi, who so far played one tournament, and he has won it in Moscow, right? So we have two guys like winning the tournament and not taking part in any other events.
Very true.
So while Grishuk and Mamiyar so far leading, but kind of by possible number of points, they are not the favorites. So that's a weird tournament, this Grand Prix series. It's very hard to predict because that's, again, a knockout system. It's still a chance, of course, for Maxime. It's still a chance for Jacques. That's perhaps... But still, even though this being a weird tournament, it's much more reliable than the Grand Swiss. Because Grand Swiss, you just have
one spot.
A bunch of people who are hunting for one only spot.
One of those people who will be hunting in Isle of Man is Levon Aronian. He was knocked out by Maxime here in Khanty-Mansiysk, and that's his only shot. He's not doing well at the Grand Prix.
Absolutely.
Nor by rating. So for Levon Aronian and a bunch of others, as you mentioned, the one and only shot is winning in the Isle of Man Grand Swiss tournament.
It'll be tough. So do we have any updates on Rajabov's interview?
Yes, we do have. We will have an information in a moment. That's my information.
That's your information. That's nice. That's nice. So.
Yeah. In the meantime, if you guys have any more questions in the Twitch chat, in the YouTube chat, this is your moment. But Mr. Rajabov is tired and he will not join us in the studio, but I believe he will then give an interview. I'm hoping.
Well, right.
Then. He will give an interview in Russian. Sorry, I'm just getting given a lot of information. That may mean that we will not be able to show the interview just yet, but we will have it translated on our YouTube channel.
Highlights and yeah.
Yes. Having said that, if he's not joining us, then we will need to say goodbye to you guys, but only for now. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, for the tie breaks between Ding Liren and Yu Yangyi. Let's just have a look at the brackets. Rajabov already in the finals, and his opponent will be either Ding Liren or Yu Yangyi.
Yeah, well, and there is one more bracket that is not shown there. But Maxime Berchier-Legrave is not leaving Khanty-Mansiysk. He is one of the players who play for the third place. That's what we've said already. No.
Yeah. Lorinda is saying, if only we knew someone who could speak Russian in the studio.
Okay, guys, not now.
I think for us, this has been a great day, even though we saw a quick and solid draw between the two Chinese players. But the other game was on fire from the opening on. So many questions for Maxime Berchier-Legrave. He will not have a good night's sleep today, maybe not even tomorrow. Luckily or unluckily for him, there are 2 free days before he starts his match against one of the Chinese players for the third place. So tomorrow is tie breaks, the day after tomorrow a free day for everyone, and then from Monday on, the finals and the match for the third place. And Evgeny, it's already your record time in Siberia. Tell us how you're doing.
Well, barely surviving. And thanks for the players. Those are very, very interesting games. Because I don't really know how I would survive if there would be another game like Ding Liren, Yu Yangyi, but dragged for 5 hours, 6 hours. Yeah, it's not much. Well, at least this one for Rajabov. First of all, it was a very well-played game and a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff we could explain. So let's hope for such games for those last days remaining.
Most certainly. Tomorrow tie breaks, that's always exciting. So first we will have 2 rapid games with the time control 25 minutes plus 10 seconds. And if that's a tie, then shorter,
shorter, all the way back to this 9 minutes joy, 9 minutes of horror.
The Armageddon. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Thanks a lot for your comments, questions, and thoughts on both the Twitch chat and the YouTube chat. We'll be back tomorrow. Make sure to come back, join us, and tell us about your thoughts. Also on Rajabov, are you surprised that he made it to the finals? How did you find today's game? And where is it that exactly that Maxime went wrong?
Where's the moment when Maxime went wrong?
Couple of questions on
that's a good question.
Critical moments. And the mentality. I think it starts with what you highlighted. The mentality that he may have thought that Rajabov wasn't really in a fighting spirit today.
Right, so we'll find out. And for now, thanks very much and see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.